Chapter 76. New Journey. The moment they heard Ryuji admitting defeat, Crow and the newly promoted revolutionary soldiers came back to their senses. Suddenly, a series of gasping sounds sounded on the field, and a layer of fine dust was rolled up. Rhodes actually defeated a senior cadre. This news is undoubtedly unbelievable, but the fact that it happened before your eyes, you have no choice but to accept it. This is too much. Although Rhodes was very strong before, he was actually not so strong as to break through the sky. It was a kind of strength within the scope of understanding, and the talent potential displayed was also acceptable. Some people like Crow and others still had the intention to catch up and surpass. But in this battle, the astonishing strength that Rhodes displayed was really unbelievable, and it shattered any hopes they had before. He's really a monster. Shinoa shook her head with a wry smile and completely lost the will to chase after him. In this life, she would consider herself lucky if she reaches the height of Ryuji. But Rhodes, this boy who is 7 or 8 years younger than her, has already surpassed Ryuji. The gap between them can hardly be measured. Moreover, she is very clear that this gap will probably become wider and wider until she can no longer see him. Crow was also a little depressed. Even his most respected teacher is no match for Rhodes, so he has nothing to say. The previous hope and self-confidence seem to have become a joke. These young people of the same generation as Rhodes were in awe. Hack, Giltio, and other senior leaders of the Revolutionary Army were also amazed and looked at Rhodes with a kind of respect. It's no longer the way they used to look at him as a junior. Strength determines status. With Rhodes' ability to defeat Ryuji, no one would foolishly treat Rhodes as a young junior. This boy in white is enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. If it weren't for the lack of qualifications, he might be directly promoted to a senior cadre. Win, I won, Rhodes won. Koala covered her mouth in surprise. Yes, it's really amazing. The look in Sabo's eyes was a little complicated. He clenched his fists and his eyes gradually became firmer. It seemed that he has to work harder, without slacking off. The moment Rhodes sheathed his sword, the battle finally came to an end. It was only then that people noticed how shattered the battlefield was. Sword marks intertwined, and the ground was scorched black as if it had been baptized by thunder. Come with me, Rhodes, the others leave. Dragon said in a deep voice, and the rest of the Revolutionary Army dispersed one after another, but before leaving, they all took a deep look at Rhodes. Having seen this battle, they had only one thought in their minds. That is, one more step and this young man will become a strong man who can change the world. How long will take? 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? No one knows, but even if it will take 3 years, this guy will only be 20 years old. Meeting room. Your task this time is to go to the Kano country and take over the work of the senior cadre, CU. Kano country is one of the countries that recently joined the world government. The country is powerful, but the situation within it is complicated. There is also the large-scale armed organization Happo Navy, which is currently in charge of it. These are related information, check it out when you have time. Intelligence Control Officer, Giltio handed over some documents. Thanks. Rhodes took it with a nod, glanced at it, and memorized it all in his mind. Next, Giltio explained Rhodes' task in detail. Generally speaking, dealing with the underground forces, collecting materials, propagating revolutionary ideas, etc. The violent overthrow of the regime is not yet the first choice of the Revolutionary Army. Actually, you should be fine dealing with this task. Giltio said, however, on this journey, you will travel alone from the New World to the Western Sea. You call this the last test. I hope you can complete it satisfactorily, and don't be careless. In the eyes of these senior leaders of the Revolutionary Army, Rhodes, who has demonstrated terrifying potential, can be called the future of the Revolutionary Army, and no one wants such a seedling to have an accident. But at this level, if you don't go out to sea and gain experience, it may be difficult for you to fully reach your potential. Therefore, no one tried to object. Okay. Rhodes nodded, suddenly feeling weird. Normal people break into the Grand Line from all over the world and finally enter the New World. This journey can often make a person transform and grow slowly through time. But Rhodes practiced in reverse. He started from the New World where the strong are like clouds, then to the first half of the Grand Line, and finally back to one of the 4 seas of the Blue Sea. Of course, this is not to say that there are no strong players and no danger in the Grand Line of the Blue Sea. Rhodes, who is familiar with the original work, is very clear about how many crouching tigers and hidden dragons this sea is hiding, and there must be many retired strong men on the blue sea. Besides, these places are also where the Marines control the most tightly. Because of Rhodes' identity as a revolutionary army, the personnels of the world government are also potential enemies. In a sense, it is even more dangerous than the New World. Okay, you go and get ready first, we're leaving tomorrow. Giltio laughed. Rhodes nodded, turned, and left. After he left, the meeting room suddenly fell silent. Giltio pondered for a while, but couldn't help but said, "Boss, the matter about Jun and Rhodes." He looked worried and a little uncertain. But Dragon waved his hand to stop him from finishing his sentence, and said calmly, "Haven't you seen it yet? For such a talented young man, it is impossible for Jun alone to influence his will and standpoint, even I can't. We just need to know that his position is definitely not on the side of the celestial dragons and the world government. To overthrow a behemoth like the world government, we must learn to be tolerant and accommodate and combine all forces of resistance." Dragon's tone was deep and his eyes were dark. The world government has ruled the world for 800 years, and it is difficult for anyone to estimate how deep its roots are. Even the Marines, who are their allies, are suffocating. What is there in the dark is simply unmeasurable. At this time, Rhodes, who had just walked out of the conference room, ran into Koala, Nia, and Sabo who were waiting for him. "How is it? When are you going to leave?" Koala said with a smile. "Tomorrow. Let's have a meal together, it's a farewell." "Okay." The four set off and soon arrived in the town. The streets and buildings are still the same. They have been away for more than half a year, and there is still no change. Walking on the street, Rhodes could feel many eyes looking at him, with awe, longing, admiration, and even envy. It is estimated that the news of the battle was spread by the reservists. Perhaps the townspeople don't know what kind of figure the swordsman Raiji is, but they still understand that Rhodes is already an unreachable star. After the farewell meal, Rhodes did not return to the headquarters castle immediately. Instead, he met with the old doctor and chatted with him for a while in the clinic before leaving the town and returning to the castle. Tomorrow, he will leave this windy and sandy, remote island and embark on a new journey. Chapter 77. The Storm. The next day, early morning. After bidding farewell to Koala and the others, Rhodes came to the shore and took a boat out to sea. After some twists and turns, he boarded a very luxuriously decorated large merchant ship. This is a team of full-time businessmen who specialize in working for the world government. You can call them government businessmen, since they have the responsibility to collect rare treasures and hand them over to the celestial dragons. Rhodes will take this ship to the Red Port, and then go overland to pass through the holy land of Mary Geoase. Although it's a pity that he can't appreciate the scenery of Fishman Island, which is 10,000 meters underwater, it is also a good thing to be able to see Mary Geoase, the most powerful holy land in the world. Besides, the road to Fishman Island isn't easy to take. One accident happened, and you're dead. However, he will always feel confident while he's traveling on land. Rhodes himself is a good citizen who doesn't even have a reward on his head. On the front, he even has the good identity of being Jun's disciple. It might seem dangerous to be in such a place, but in fact, it's the safest way. "Young man, what's your name?" Rhodes turned around and saw a middle-aged man approaching, with a red face and luxurious clothes. Behind him, there were two bodyguards in black. They looked very powerful. This guy was in charge of the ship. His name is Saurus. He is a high-ranked official and businessman under the command of the world government. It is said that he manages a large area of industry. He is probably equivalent to the chairman of a state-owned enterprise in his previous life. Of course, in this world where power is paramount, a mere businessman's status may seem to be a bit sad, but in fact, with that status, he can get whatever he wants. "I'm Rhodes." Rhodes nodded slightly. After all, it was his ship, so can't offend him. The young man has ventured into the new world at such a young age. He's really promising. Saurus looked at Rhodes secretly. It's not a big deal to take people across the red line. They used to do it so often that it was not worth his attention. But after hearing that it was such a young man, Saurus became a little interested. As a businessman, it has become his habit to make friends with strong people or befriend young people with great potential. Only by constantly expanding your network and making friends with strong people you can stabilize your position. This is the experience that Saurus has summed up after working for the world government for many years. However, Rhodes didn't want to attract too much attention, so he didn't plan to chat with Saurus. But this guy is too enthusiastic, his eyes are extremely vicious, and he acted as if he has already seen something in Rhodes, so he tried to force Rhodes to chat with him. He even brought some rare bottles of wine with him to smooth things up. All that he wanted to know is who is this young man? Tu drank the wine and chattered. He knew that such a young man won't be able to control his liquor as well as him, so he kept pouring Rhodes glass time after time, but the latter kept his composure the entire time. It wasn't until night fell that Rhodes took his leave and returned to the cabin to continue tempering his internal organs. This young man is quite interesting. Soros was a bit surprised. Under normal circumstances, youths of this age are the most unflattering, especially after drinking, but Rhodes has remained unbelievably calm, and even someone as experienced as Soros couldn't see through him. So what if he's calm? No matter how strong you are at such an age, your strength is always limited. A black-clothed bodyguard said disdainfully. Another bodyguard in black also agreed, being young means that you haven't fully exercised and pushed your body to the very limit. It's impossible to hone your skills to the top level. Physique is the foundation of everything. I can beat 10 of him with one hand. The bodyguard in black was very confident. He used to be a well-known mercenary in the underground world. He had killed even powerful pirates who had rewards of over 100 million on their heads, and he looked down on young strong men the most. Besides, if Rhodes is really strong, why would he leave the New World and return to the first half of the Grand Line? Soros shook his head lightly when he heard these words. No matter what the reason is, it's never wrong to make new friends. Who knows when this guy will be one of these famous strong men of the sea? Ah! Both of the two bodyguards sneered and didn't bother to argue. The two of them have an employment relationship with Soros, not a superior-subordinate relationship, so naturally, they don't need to show too much face. The following journey was very smooth. Rhodes has been training in the cabin. Except for the time of eating, he doesn't go out at all. This made Soros feel a little helpless. He could only shake his head and give up on befriending Rhodes. He thought that Rhodes may be humbled by the strong pirates in the New World. This kind of thing is not uncommon. The strong people who came to the New World, after witnessing the gap between heaven and earth, often suffer from mental breakdowns and even commit suicide. Otherwise, the first half of the Grand Line would not be called a paradise by the people of the New World. When the pirates from Paradise break into the New World, there will often encounter bloody storms. On this day, the clouds were thick and the sea was churning. The ship was swaying. Rhodes had to stop his practice, came to the railing of the ship, and looked into the distance. Crack! The weather in the New World has always been unpredictable. One moment the sun was shining brightly, but the next moment it was already covered with dark clouds, and the sea was set off by stormy waves as if it was the end of the world. The thunder was roaring and lightning was flickering. The torrential rain followed immediately. Such heavy rain could drown such a huge ship if one isn't prepared. I hope we're not out of luck today. Rhodes said to himself lightly and waited intently. If it was a normal storm, he could cut through it with a single sword and save the ship, but if it set off a natural disaster-level tornado, he could only protect himself and leave early. Crackling! A bolt of lavender lightning pierced the sky, stretching for tens of hundreds of miles. It was stunning and domineering. This how real thunder is. A flash of thunder flashed in Rhodes' eyes, revealing yearning. If one can master such a terrifying power, even people like the Yonko can be easily defeated. Time gradually passed. Rhodes was lucky. The storm didn't cause any major natural disasters. The ship sailed out of the area without any risk, and the sun was shining brightly again. Looking back, it was less than a kilometer away, and there was still a huge storm, with turbulent and terrifying waves. A magical celestial phenomenon. Even if he saw it more than once, Rhodes couldn't help but be amazed. With such unreasonable, terrifying, and extraordinary changes in the sky, it is no wonder that any pirate group must recruit qualified navigators to venture safely into the New World. On the sea, no one, no matter how powerful he is, can withstand a real natural disaster. That is, even epic battles between legendary characters such as the Pirate King, Gol. D. Roger and the Golden Lion, Shiki, can be stopped by a huge natural disaster. That's not right. I feel that someone like the Whitebeard in his heydays would be able to stop such natural disasters with his fists. Rhodes was a little lost in his thoughts as he was about to return to the cabin, but suddenly raised his eyebrows, as if he had sensed something. Chapter 78. The Sea King. The sky was a bright, clear blue, and not a single cloud marred its perfection. The crew of the ship was jubilant, feeling as though the gods themselves had blessed their journey. However, unbeknownst to them, a shadow was slowly but surely growing larger and larger in the waters surrounding their vessel. As if on cue, the air was suddenly filled with the ominous presence of a top predator, a creature that sat atop the food chain. Oh no! We're in danger! The two black-clad bodyguards finally picked up on the shift in the atmosphere and turned around, just in time to see a massive figure burst through the surface of the water with a mighty roar. The resulting sound wave was almost tangible, sweeping across the area and threatening to rupture eardrums with its sheer force. The waves caused by the creature's emergence were also strong enough to nearly capsize the large sailboat. Panic set in among the crew as screams filled the air. In this world, sea kings have virtually no natural enemies. Their massive size grants them almost unbeatable strength, and even a glancing blow from one of these beasts could spell disaster for a ship and all aboard. If there isn't a sufficiently powerful person present, coming face to face with a sea king is tantamount to a death sentence. The sea king's body loomed like a small mountain, blocking out the sun and causing the very earth to tremble beneath it. This was a scene unlike any that had ever been witnessed before, one that seemed to belong in the very depths of the underworld. Saurus and the others were instantly drenched in a cold sweat, with aching pains in their brows, as if they were defenseless commoners who had stumbled upon a tiger-like beast in the wilds of the Grand Line. The sky was shrouded, and so were their hearts, filled with despair. Don't fight back, you can't win. All we can do now is pray it's too lazy to pay us any mind. Saurus trembled as he tried to stop the black-clad bodyguard. The two black-clad bodyguards were immediately scared out of their wits upon hearing the words, having only acted on instinct before. Now that they were reminded, they suddenly realized their own insignificance and hung their heads low, trembling like quails. With this size, it shouldn't be considered as a large sea king. It's probably a medium-sized one, and it's relatively slender. Rhodes had read about sea kings in the books of the Revolutionary Army and was familiar with their classification. They range from small to medium, large, and super large. Small sea kings are only tens of meters long, but super large ones can be over 5,000 meters in length. To put that in perspective, the average height of an island in the Grand Line is only 10,000 meters. Two super large sea kings, placed end to end, could cover the Holy Land of the Marejoys and flatten it with ease. However, it's unlikely that a sea king of such enormous size would appear in such a place. The sea king currently in front of them was about 45 meters high, with a length of over 100 meters when including the part that wasn't visible above the surface of the sea. His size was indeed relatively slender among medium-sized sea kings. Based on its shape and nature, it should be a normal squid type with tentacles, relying on brute force. It's not one of those special electric eel sea kings, for example. After observing the sea king for a while, Rhodes let out a sigh of relief. For a sea king of this size, if it were an electric eel type, its power would likely be much more terrifying than Enel's Goro fruit, capable of instantly vaporizing a small area of the sea. It would be unstoppable, like a mortal trying to block a killing blow from a god. It's no wonder that sea kings are known as one of the three ancient weapons. As he marveled, Rhodes suddenly leaped up, his body stepping into midair as if on a staircase, gradually ascending to the top of the sky. In the blink of an eye, he arrived at the top of the sea king's head. Standing in front of it, Rhodes, who was of normal human size, looked even smaller than an ant in comparison. The sea king's single eyeball was much larger than Rhodes. A fierce and terrifying aura, like that of a higher creature, mixed with a salty smell, rushed towards him. But Rhodes remained expressionless, even feeling a bit stuffy from the smell. Feel the thunder. Looking at the pupil that reflected his own image like a mirror, Rhodes spoke indifferently. Thud, thud. The dazzling thunder roared, piercing the sky like a silver snake. This was the special ability of Rhodes, the Thunder Dragon's Roar. It is a technique that could release a strong burst of thunder from the user's body. As the Sea King let out a miserable cry, Rhodes's body was surrounded by a golden halo, and a light dragon phantom appeared behind him, with a pair of dragon horns on his head. It was because of the gust of wind that Saurus, the black-clad bodyguard, and the others belatedly reacted and looked up. And then they saw a scene they would never forget. They saw a blurry figure in white clothes, holding a sword, proudly standing in the sky dozens of meters above the ground, bathed in dazzling thunder, and suddenly, it swung its sword. One blade flow, heavenly thunder cut. There was no way to describe the sharpness of this sword. As this sword swung out, it seemed to split heaven and earth into two parts. In the pupils of countless people, all that remained was that sword energy that converged with endless thunder, like a thunderbolt that flickered straight through the sky and earth. This sword energy was like a withering, destructive force, easily cutting off the tentacles the Sea King reached out with, and then slashing through the void and instantly cutting through the Sea King's head, which was even larger than a sailboat. Growl! The Sea King let out a heart-wrenching roar. With this strike, it had a small half of its head cut off, and then endless thunder burst out, and almost instantly enveloped most of its body. A burst of meat aroma spread out. The terrifying and powerful current made Saurus and the others feel like they were going to be electrocuted even though they were tens or hundreds of meters away. But the Sea King was worthy of being the ruler of the sea, with an incredibly tenacious life force. Even though blood gushed out of it like a river, it did not die. It was unknown how it managed to do so. In the stunned gaze of Rhodes, this Sea King closed its slippery eyes and, with lightning speed, plunged into the sea and completely disappeared within a few breaths. Damn it! Rhodes couldn't help but spit out a curse. It was a very uncomfortable feeling, like being caught in the middle of trying to show off. Fortunately, he was high up at the time, and Saurus and the others were too busy dealing with the waves the Sea King had raised to pay attention to this scene. Rhodes blew a sigh of sea breeze, somewhat annoyingly. He sheathed his sword with a clang, slowly returning to the surface of the sea. He looked around and soon saw the severed tentacle. Although it's called a severed tentacle, it's still longer than the entire ship. Can this be eaten? Is it good? How should I eat it? Rhodes was a little at a loss because the tentacle was just too big and thick, it simply looked delicious. It was even longer than the large snake that Rhodes had killed before during a mission, and the thickness was completely incomparable. Rhodes estimated that even if he just cut off a small piece, it would still be enough for a satisfying meal. I'll ask Solomon and the others. Chapter 79. Up to the top of the world. The sea gradually calmed, and the wind and waves subsided. People finally caught their breath and looked at each other, each seeing in the other's eyes a dreamy, unbelievable sensation. Thank goodness, we're saved. I thought I was a goner just now. Who is that guy? He's so handsome and strong. He seriously injured a Sea King with just one sword. He's amazing. He looks pretty young too. He has such unlimited potential. The crowd regained their senses, swallowing their saliva and wearing looks of relief at having survived a disaster. At this point, Saurus walked to the ship's railing, his eyes filled with complex emotions. It seems that I've misjudged him. He's already the predator. Saurus was filled with amazement. He had thought Rhodes was a solitary man who had been struck down by a strong pirate in the New World. But with this kind of talent and potential, no matter where he was, or where he went before, he would be the one doing the striking, not getting struck down. The two black-clad bodyguards followed behind. They were both tall men over 2 meters in height. But at this moment they blushed and wished they could bury their heads in the sea, especially the one who boasted he could beat 10 of Rhodes. The guy almost knelt down on the ground. Rhodes paid no attention to any of this. He looked calm and slowly landed on the deck. In an instant, the entire ship fell silent, save for the sound of the sea breeze, and all the people wore looks of awe. Saurus saw the opportunity and quickly walked up to Rhodes, respectfully saying, "Thank you very much for coming to our aid, I am grateful. Don't say these polite words, just send someone to deal with that food." Rhodes was not as cold as Saurus had imagined, but instead pointed excitedly at the tentacle in the distance and said, "All right." Saurus was slightly taken aback. He seems like he really does like tentacles? He didn't dare to neglect and quickly ordered his men to drive the ship over and arrange the tentacle. He also called the head chef on board and asked him to do his best to prepare the food, making sure to satisfy Rhodes. The head chef had also witnessed the divine-like scene just now and naturally didn't dare to neglect it. He shouted and started to work. In a short while, the rare seafood was made into 18 dishes, with a fragrant aroma. Rhodes ate with great relish and tasted the deliciousness of the deep sea. The meat was very fresh and more delicious than the grilled snake. It also contained abundant energy and nutrition and was very invigorating. No wonder strong people sailing on the sea are rarely starved to death. Sea kings may be difficult to deal with, but low-level sea beasts are enough to easily satisfy the needs of the entire ship. Rhodes almost swallowed his tongue and saw from the corners of his eyes that Saurus and the others were standing respectfully not far away, sniffing the smell of food, constantly swallowing saliva, but not daring to approach. Even the head chef was like this. Rhodes smiled and said, "Let's eat together, I can't finish it all by myself. This doesn't seem right." Saurus said this but started eating the fastest. It's really good. He praised it, as food made from sea kings was truly top-class food that only strong people could enjoy. Saurus, with his status comparable to that of a state-owned enterprise chairman in the real world, rarely ate it, and most of the time it wasn't fresh. The two black-clad bodyguards carefully watched Rhodes, their hearts always feeling a little uneasy. Because they realized a very serious problem. When they spoke contemptuously earlier, Rhodes wasn't too far away. Perhaps ordinary people, or even ordinary strong people, couldn't hear it, but with Rhodes's strength, it was probably crystal clear. Thinking of this, the two super mercenaries, who had caused a stir in the underground world and killed over 100 million bounty pirates, seemed like wronged primary school students facing their teacher, shrinking together, with their 2-meter-plus heights looking about the same height as the normally sized Rhodes. They didn't even have the desire to eat, just hoping that Rhodes wouldn't pay attention to them. Rhodes's gaze didn't even fall on them. He wasn't so cruel as to take someone's life because of a couple of contemptuous words, but a slight reprimand was still necessary. This time, learn the lesson and don't look down on people because of their age in the future. In the future, there will be many young people with extraordinary strength. This time, the host and guests enjoyed themselves. Saurus's ability to adapt to the situation was impeccable. If Rhodes was a normal strong person, he would have confidence in building a relationship and even achieving a fairly equal status. But with Rhodes's age and strength, he didn't have much confidence. Moreover, he had to think deeply that with such strength at such an age, there must almost certainly be a powerful teacher behind him, or an unknown force supporting him. This trip may have just been a test of his skills. People like that should just be kept in the back of his mind. It's not worth the risk of getting involved with them, as it could be either a blessing or a curse. Rhodes didn't know about the self-projections of this business official. After filling up on food and drink, he returned to his cabin to continue his endless, grueling training. He wouldn't let temporary prosperity distract him, and he was very clear about where all this respect came from. Strength is the foundation of everything. The stronger he is, the more he can understand his own insignificance. He still has a long way to go to reach the peak of the sea. As they continued their journey, it went smoothly. One day later, they passed the inspection of the G1 branch of the Marines and were allowed to proceed. The merchant ship soon arrived at the Red Port, just below the holy land of Marie Joyce. In this world, there are two ways to enter and exit the New World, one was through the sky, and the other was through the sea. The path before Rhodes was the government-exclusive route that ascends 10,000 meters into the sky. Of course, others could also pass through this route by applying for permission, but it often takes a long time to wait and requires giving up their ships. Saurus had already prepared the necessary arrangements and, upon arriving at the Red Port, led Rhodes and the others straight to the lift. The interior of the Red Port was unremarkable, especially the half of the port on the New World side, which was almost undeveloped and heavily guarded by formidable soldiers everywhere. As they walked on the road, the surveillance never stopped. With Saurus leading the way, Rhodes and the others quickly boarded the lift. The lift was made of a special metal with extremely strong bearing capacity and was very wide. Rhodes and the others stood on it and were barely noticeable. Saurus directed his subordinates to carry the cargo while Rhodes curiously looked around. The elevator now will go up 10,000 meters. In the previous world, Mount Everest, the highest mountain on Earth, was only about 8,000 meters high. I wonder what kind of energy drives it, Rhodes muttered in amazement. Soon, Saurus was ready and called out to them, and the elevator slowly rose, very smoothly, with hardly any bumps. The high altitude in the pirate world is different from that on Earth in the previous world. A high altitude does not make it impossible for humans to survive. No matter how many times I see it, I feel tiny like dust. Saurus sighed beside him. The altitude here is already very high, and the red line below has long since become a small black dot. Looking out to the sea, it is vast and boundless, and the blue sky seems to be within reach. The faint fog seems to be within reach, and this feeling of standing on the clouds makes one feel as if they are trampling the entire world under their feet, irresistibly fascinated. No wonder the world government built its headquarters here. This place is indeed worthy of belonging to the top of the world's power. Rhodes whispered to himself, leaning on the railing and looking far into the distance, with deep look in his eyes. Chapter 80. Sabayati Archipelago. The Holy Land Marie Joyce. This city's center is the home of the world's celestial dragons, an enormous castle that seems to reach for the stars, surrounded by clouds and mist, unlike anything in the mortal realm. The outskirts of the city are the headquarters of the world government, the office of the 5 Elder Stars, and the Fleet Admiral, Sengoku. The suburbs even further out are where the world government's high officials and the celestial dragon slaves reside. Rhodes and the others arrived at the Holy Land Marijois through the roads of Dressrosa. Upon arriving here, Rhodes was not as awestruck as he was before when he gazed upon the sea or up at the sky. The world is worthy of awe, but this corrupt and degraded noble government and the self-proclaimed gods, the celestial dragons, are not. Their journey through Marijois went smoothly, except for some discomfort caused by the celestial dragon guards' show of power and slightly scrutinizing and arrogant glances. Before long, Rhodes and the others arrived on this side of the Great Line. However, there was a difference here. Instead of a fully technological lift, there was a more magical bubble gondola. This type of bubble is a unique product of the climate of the Skypiea archipelago and is very practical and beautiful. Another journey of 10,000 meters ascent. Rhodes and the others once again landed at the Red Port, only this time it was the Red Port on the first half of the Great Line. This port is clearly more prosperous and bustling. As soon as Rhodes and the others emerged from the bubble, someone came up to them, ready to say something, but suddenly saw the smile that wasn't really a smile on Sora's face, and these people were suddenly scared and fell back. Soras, who works for the world government, may not be much in front of strong people like Rhodes, but for these ordinary merchants, he is an irreplaceable big shot, who cannot be offended. Soras couldn't help but smile. In the New World, he may be unknown, but in the first half of the Great Line, and in the archipelago region, Soras is one of the few big shots, and no one knows how many people treat him as a VIP. However, seeing Rhodes's indifferent gaze, Soro shook all over and quickly led the way. This way please, I have a special boat heading to the Sabayati. Rhodes nodded lightly and walked forward first. Soras followed, half a step behind, while his demeanor was extremely respectful. The group left quickly, leaving a deep impression on the merchants. Who is that young man? He can even make Soras so respectful and pleasing. It must be the offspring of a high official in the world government. Oh, it really pays to be born into the right family. You don't have to struggle your whole life. Everyone shook their heads and sighed, showing envy and jealousy. At this time, Rhodes and the others also arrived at the port and boarded a very luxurious, even ostentatious, large sailboat. Seeing Rhodes's surprised gaze, Soras awkwardly said, I work for the world government, so I naturally have to put on a good front. That suits you. Rhodes nodded casually. Everyone has their own survival skills. Soras goes to great lengths to make connections and curry favor with the upper ranks. Rhodes, on the other hand, just focuses on training and becoming stronger. When the time comes, he will naturally enjoy endless power, status, and wealth. A position derived from strength is the most stable. The Sabayati Islands are considered a transit point on the entire Great Line. Not only is this place a lookout for pirates heading to the New World, but it is also very close to the Marines' headquarters and the Red Port. This naturally superior location has brought together countless pirates, marines, nobles, and officials of the world government, as well as attracting countless merchants to do business here. Due to the world government's indulgence of the Sabayati Islands, many powerful forces from the Dark World, such as the Donquixote family, have many industries here. This group of islands is known as the world's largest commodity distribution center, where all kinds of treasures can be found, even extremely rare items such as devil fruits appear from time to time. Rhodes came to the Sabayati Islands not only to see the so-called grey area but also to search for a famous sword. His original longsword made by the revolutionary headquarters is no longer able to withstand the burden, even with the support of the Busos Hoku Haki. However, Rhodes does not want to frequently change swords. He prefers to get everything done in one step. The best swords are the supreme great blades, and the second best is still usable. Rhodes asked Soras, which shop here has the best weapons, especially famous swords, and blades. A weapon shop. Soras was momentarily confused before slapping his forehead. There's a really good one on the 14th island. The owner is said to be a master blacksmith who's made blades for many sword masters, and he's renowned far and wide. Oh! Rhodes's eyes lit up. This kind of person might have some really good swords in their collection. The 14th island was a lawless area, with pirates carrying swords everywhere. However, there was still a basic order in place. This area is under the control of the Donquixote family, so normal pirates can fight as much as they want, but they can't cause trouble in the shops, Soros responsibly explained the local customs of the Sabayati archipelago. I heard that this year's supernova, Cavendish, has already landed on the Sabayati archipelago, Soros said. He's a tough one, and he hasn't even entered the New World yet, but his bounty is already 280 million belly. The so-called supernovas are pirates with bounties of over 100 million belly in the first half of the Grand Line. These people have exceptional talent and strength, and they also have a strong aura about them. Cavendish? He's not bad, Rhodes said with an indifferent expression. Supernova bounties often have some inflation, so Cavendish's real strength was probably around 240 million belly. Pirates with this level are at most a brigade general level, and perhaps they are slightly tricky to deal with due to some unique ability, but Rhodes could kill them easily as long as they were within his line of sight. They wouldn't even be able to run if he wanted to. It's called, the 10,000 Blades Pavilion. Soros said. Although the Sabayati archipelago has many shops and a huge market, it's ultimately controlled by a few big powers. The 10,000 Blades Pavilion is one of them, and it has a history of hundreds of years. Soros introduced as they walked in. The staff had already come up to ask what they wanted to buy. Those who could come to the 10,000 Blades Pavilion were at least top-level swordsmen, and sword masters were not uncommon, so it was usually a big deal. Call your master, Soros said haughtily to the small shopkeeper, despite his respectful attitude towards Rhodes. Who are you? The shopkeeper asked, a little confused. In a place like the sword master's shop, the highest position was not held by the shopkeeper, but rather by masters who oversaw the shop. These masters were famous blacksmiths and the prized possessions of the shop, with significant influence. Please wait a moment, the shopkeeper said, despite his doubts. He could tell by the man's demeanor and well-groomed appearance that he was someone of importance. As they waited, a staff member brought them some fragrant tea. Not long after, the sound of footsteps could be heard approaching. An old craftsman with a beard in disarray emerged from the back, looking to be in his 50s or older. Chapter 81. Exchanging information. Ha ha ha, it's none other than Mr. Soros himself. You grace us with your presence. Why didn't you inform us of your arrival in advance? The old master approached, bowing in reverence. Soros, feeling a bit of pomposity bubble up within him, quickly suppressed the urge upon remembering the young man waiting nearby. He inquired, Master, I seek a fine-named sword. Might I request that you present your finest offerings? The old master gave Rhodes a look of mild surprise. Anyone who could earn such high regard from Soros must be someone of great importance. Please, follow me, he said, leading them to a room of a more prestigious caliber. Unlike the outer room, cluttered with swords of all shapes and sizes, this room contained only 9 pieces. The sheaths alone, crafted from the finest materials, exuded a sense of antique grandeur. Rhodes stepped forward and unsheathed a sword with a resounding clink. The blade gleamed like a pool of autumn water, reflecting faint starlight. This flying star was crafted from deep-sea fine iron, a process that took 49 days to complete. Its sharpness and durability are unparalleled, rivaling even the finest of knives. When it comes to swords, the old master is confident and speaks with the air of an expert. Rhodes examined the sword before sighing and running the blade on 2 of his fingers. To his surprise, it left only a faint white mark. It's decent, Rhodes said, returning the sword to its sheath. The old master stared in shock, his mouth agape. Rhodes picked up another sword, drawing the blade. The color of the blade was deep red, and holding it gave off a faint warmth, like a bundle of flames. This sword is called the Red Flame and has been tempered in molten lava 99 times, earning it the title of 100-fold refined steel. It's extremely sharp. However, he never finished his sentence. Rhodes ran the blade again, and this time, instead of a faint white mark, there was a barely noticeable red mark. It's quite sharp, Rhodes said, nodding. The old master. Soros also had a toothache. This was truly an unconventional method of testing a sword. After that, the old master didn't bother introducing the rest of the swords. He watched with a numb expression as Rhodes tested each of the 9 treasures of the shop, and none of them made Rhodes's fingers even bleed. For a moment, he had the urge to return to farming, feeling completely defeated. They're not bad, but they don't meet my expectations. Rhodes was disappointed. Most of the swords he saw were good enough for a regular sword master, but they didn't meet his standards. He might use them for now, but he will always end up switching to something else later. Soros noticed Rhodes's reaction and frowned, Turning to the old master. He had hoped to complete Rhodes's request and make some connections in the process. With your level of skill, these swords are not quite worthy of you, the old master said hesitantly, looking at Saurus. I remember there's an underground auction on 13 Island in a couple of days. There's supposed to be a great sword among the items up for bidding. I was planning to try to get it, but I heard that a wealthy merchant had already reserved it, so I didn't see the point in competing. Reserved it? Saurus said scornfully. This merchant is apparently the top merchant in the West Sea. He's buying the great sword as a gift for the king of the flower country, who's obsessed with collecting famous swords. I bet he wouldn't think twice about spending a few billion bellies on it. The top merchant in the West Sea? Saurus said, frowning. That could be a problem. I don't have much money to spare, and if I use too many public funds, I'll be in trouble. We'll go to this auction, Rhodes said, walking out of the room. Saurus thanked the old master and followed him. After they left the sword shop, the group found a place to stay. 2 days later, they arrived on the 13th island and were about to head to the auction when a figure suddenly flew out of a hut in front of them, crashing heavily to the ground. The guy was unconscious, with a swollen face and a bruised nose. 13th Island, I've heard of this place, said Rhodes as he slightly tilted his head and saw a sign hanging above the hut that read Shucky's Rip-Off Bar. Shucky and the Dark King, really? Rhodes thought to himself as he was about to pass the hut, not wanting to provoke the legendary pirate. Wait a minute, if it's Shucky, she might know what I'm looking for. Rhodes paused, recalling that Shucky was known to be an informant who knew many small bits of information. Thinking for a moment, he decided to go into the bar. Welcome. What can I get for you? A woman's voice called out from inside. A cup of red tea, please. Rhodes casually sat down and looked towards the bar. Sitting behind the bar was a woman with graceful charm. She had short, neatly styled hair with a slight curl at the temples and a cigarette between her lips. She glanced at Rhodes with a slight look of surprise before lowering her head to prepare the tea. She then brought a cup of red tea over with a smile. The apprentice of the great sword master, Jun, you really brought some excitement to this small shop. Oh, you know me? Rhodes asked. Rhodes was really surprised. He didn't expect Shucky's intelligence to reach this level. Spark is not a minor character, the news of his defeat is a very popular topic nowadays. Rhodes, the young man swordsman, defeating Lao Ji and Harmon with 1 against 2, is also known as a famous story between swordsmen. Shucky blew out a smoke ring, smiled, and said, I'm guessing since you came to me, you want to ask for some information. Shucky cut to the chase, and Rhodes didn't beat around the bush either, nodded and said, news about the supreme great sword. Tisk. Shucky clicked her tongue and her eyes flickered with a strange light. Such levels of famous swords are only eligible for possession by swordsmen of corresponding strength. It looks like this young man has the confidence to challenge the great sword master of the sea. She hesitated for a moment, smiled, and said, although the supreme great swords are very rare, I do know some news. Oh. Rhodes's eyes lit up. But he suddenly noticed Shucky's somewhat mischievous smile. For example, Yoru, one of the 12 supreme grade. I can provide you with the accurate location for free. The smile on Rhodes's face gradually disappeared, and he didn't know whether to say sob or not. Everyone in the world knows that Yoru is in the hands of my hawk. I can pay, it doesn't matter if it's 1 million or 10 million, Rhodes said seriously. But Shucky's expression remained unchanged. She shook her head lightly and said, some information cannot be measured by money. News about the supreme great swords may not be of much use to most people in the world, but for top-notch sword masters and even great sword masters, it is deadly tempting, and it is worth any price to exchange for it. Rhodes nodded in agreement and said after a moment of contemplation, how about exchanging information for information? Shucky's expression slightly improved as Rhodes was no fool. If he could say this, the information he had must be of equal value. Tell me. Rhodes was not worried about Shucky's credibility as most old-generation pirates were loyal and trustworthy. He pondered for a moment. As a traverser, he naturally knew many things that ordinary people did not know, but there was not much information that could be considered equivalent to the supreme grade swords. Half a moment later, he suddenly said, how about information about the Pirate King, Gol. D. Roger? As soon as this name was mentioned, Shucky's expression changed instantly. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly dangerously and she narrowed her eyes as she said, tell me. Chapter 82. The auction. I wonder what interesting twists and turns the top war will take now that they know Ace's identity in advance. Rhodes walked out of the Shucky bar at a leisurely pace, lost in thought. The information he had traded was, of course, the fact that Ace is the son of the pirate king Roger, along with all the details from that time. For instance, how Ace's mother, Rouge, managed to evade the Marines' search and keep her pregnancy hidden for 20 grueling months. Thanks to this crucial piece of information, Shucky, with her sharp intuition for intelligence, was able to easily discern its authenticity. She was taken aback by the revelation. Clearly, she hadn't anticipated that Roger had left a successor alive, unknown even to members of the Roger pirates. Eager to get the word to Riley as soon as possible, Shucky excitedly told Rhodes about the sword and sent him on his way. As luck would have it, the sword was located in Rhodes's destination, the Flower Country. Apparently, it was a royal treasure of the Flower Country, though it's unclear how Shucky obtained this information. With the specific details of the great sword, Rhodes no longer felt the need to obtain the sword at the auction. Instead, he approached the event with a carefree attitude and met up with Saurus, who had been waiting for him outside. Upon arriving at the entrance of the auction, they found the place heavily guarded, with a circle of security guards standing at the entrance. "Sorry, this is a private area. If you don't have an invitation, please leave," a security guard stepped forward and said politely. "We don't have an invitation," Saurus said coolly. "Please announce that I, Saurus, have come to pay a visit." The security guard hesitated upon seeing Saurus' confident demeanor. Could he be some kind of big shot? At that moment, a round middle-aged man walked over slowly from a nearby location. Upon seeing Saurus, his eyes brightened and he rushed over with excitement. "Sir Saurus! How did you get here? I thought you were working in the New World." "It's you, Hardin." "I just returned," Saurus replied with a hint of arrogance. "I see that you are also attending the auction. It's a coincidence that I get to bask in your radiance. Take us in." "Of course, it's an honor to have you bask in my radiance. Please do me the favor of helping me out in the future as well," Hardin responded with enthusiasm. Saurus, a well-known and trusted merchant of the world government, can open a world of new possibilities for such a merchant as Hardin. Even a small spill of oil and water from him could fill Hardin's stomach to the brim. Seeing that they were acquainted, the security guard allowed them to pass without any obstacles. As they entered the auction venue, they were struck by its immense size. The seats in the venue were already occupied by all sorts of people, all of whom were dressed elegantly and had remarkable demeanors. They were either wealthy merchants or nobles or exceptionally powerful individuals with an imposing presence. "Sir Saurus, you're here as well." "Sir Saurus." As soon as Rhodes and the others entered the venue, many people seemed to recognize Saurus's identity and stood up to greet him. Those who did not know him were still in confusion, and the people next to them quickly introduced Saurus to them. This was the world government's trusted merchant, a figure regarded as a top businessman in the industry. Rhodes found it amusing that Saurus, who recently had almost been killed by a sea king in the New World, had such a great reputation in the Sabaody archipelago. Of course, there were also many people who looked down on him. For example, the richest merchant of the West Sea, Gates, whose industry was primarily based in the West Sea, with a slight presence in the first half of the Grand Line, had little overlap with Saurus, who was based primarily in the Sabaody archipelago. As Saurus basked in the flattery and fawning of the crowd, Gates couldn't help but snort coldly, feeling a little envious. This was because the merchants he had been chatting with earlier had also run over to greet Saurus. After all, Sabaody was their home turf. "Forget it, it has nothing to do with me. Let's just quickly bid on that great sword and return to the West Sea as soon as possible. The Grand Line is still too dangerous." Gates took a deep breath and thought to himself. The auction finally began. The first item up for auction was a set of armor that belonged to a famous pirate. The auctioneer introduced the item and the bidding began. The price quickly soared and many people participated in the bidding. Saurus also joined in, but his eyes were fixed on a corner of the venue. There was a young man with a straw hat sitting there, who seemed to be in his early 20s. He wore a straw hat and a blue coat, and his facial features were delicate and handsome. He sat there quietly as if he was waiting for something. Saurus' eyes narrowed, and he couldn't help but wonder who this young man was. The starting bid was 30 million bellies, but it wasn't long before it soared to 60 million. In the end, the auction was won by Gates, the richest merchant of the West Sea, for a whopping 90 million. Many people couldn't help but marvel at his wealth and extravagance. Throughout the rest of the auction, Gates continued to make bold bids, showcasing his status as the premier merchant of the West Sea and even causing Saurus to feel a pang of envy. While the Grand Line may have boasted higher average strength than the Four Seas, the Four Seas covered a vast, stable region that generated a significantly higher economic effect. Gates' wealth was undoubtedly among the top echelon in the world. Humph, if this guy doesn't leave Sabaody today, he might not make it out alive, Saurus sneered to himself. As the saying goes, wealth should not be flaunted openly. Anyone who dared to spend so lavishly in the chaotic region of the Sabaody archipelago should better be prepared for the hungry wolves who will come knocking. Rhodes nodded slightly in agreement. This kind of rich merchant was the favorite prey for pirates. And now, the last item of this auction, the host announced as he unveiled a sheathed long sword on the tray. Before it was even drawn, the sword exuded a sharp and fierce aura. It was clearly not an ordinary item. This sword, named Aranakiri, is a masterpiece created by a master blacksmith with his blood, sweat, and tears. It was forged using earth fire and was struck by lightning on the day it was completed, resulting in its exceptional quality. Even among the great blades, it ranks among the top, the host explained. Starting bid, 30 million bellies. The various powerful individuals and wealthy nobles present all looked excited at the prospect of bidding on the sword. It was clear that they had come specifically for the lanky. Powerful individuals craved great blades, while wealthy nobles either collected them or used them to build connections and expand their networks. Take Gates, for example. His business empire centered in his homeland of Flower Country, so it was crucial that he maintain good relations with the Flower Country royal family. If it could be solved with money, it wasn't even worth considering. 40 million bellies. Saurus raised his paddle. Some people were surprised to see Saurus bidding, as he was not a swordsman and had no particular interest in collecting famous swords. Could it be that someone within the world government had their eye on this sword? Upon thinking this, no one else dared to speak up. The world government had ruled the world for 800 years and accumulated a vast amount of power, making it not something that ordinary people would dare to defy. As the host hesitated on whether or not to bring down the hammer, a confident voice called out, 100 million. Everyone was shocked as they searched for the source of the voice, and saw that it was none other than Gates, the wealthiest merchant in the West Sea. You! Saurus seethed with anger, feeling disrespected by Gates. 110 million. Saurus raised his bid again. 150 million. Gates calmly responded. Many of the wealthy merchants and nobles present were on the brink of collapse, shocked by the huge increments in the bids. For every 1 million added by the other side, Gates added 4 or 5 million. It was clear that he was determined to win. Saurus was taken aback. He had already considered using million as his unit of measurement to be extravagant, but he never expected Gates to be even more over the top. For a moment, Saurus couldn't help feeling a little overwhelmed. He wasn't like Gates, a free trader with no oversight. He had the world government to answer to, and while he did have a generous amount of funds, he couldn't afford to be frivolous with them or risk being targeted. As he considered this, Saurus couldn't help but turn to the leader of their group, Rhodes, seeking his opinion. Rhodes's brow furrowed slightly. He had previously bragged about having 200 million on hand, enough to buy a great blade, but he hadn't anticipated running into someone like Gates, who seemed prepared to do whatever is to take what he wants. Our limit is 200 million. Anything more isn't worth it, Rhodes declared. After all, his eyes were locked on the sword in the possession of the Flower Country, and while the Aranakiri was a decent sword, it wasn't a necessity. Fine, Saurus gritted his teeth and raised his placard once more. 160 million. Chapter 83. Fate. However, Saurus's voice had barely left his lips when Gates spoke up again. 200 million. Gates' tone was calm and collected, oozing the confidence of a wealthy tycoon. His lavish display has even caught the attention of many admiring women. Everyone was left speechless by this exorbitant bid. It's no wonder West Sea is considered the top. Gates is so commanding and doesn't seem to care about money at all. Saurus's eyelids twitched as he was forced to sit down, defeated. Mr. Rhodes, this guy is so disrespectful, it's like he's purposely trying to go against us. What should we do? Saurus said through gritted teeth, his eyes filled with killing intent. No need, Rhodes replied coolly. There is a unique connection between masters and swords. Just like Zoro, at the weapon shop in Logue Town, he was able to obtain 2 good swords out of nowhere. That saying is true, swords indeed choose their masters. What is meant to be in one's possession will eventually find its way to thy hands. Seeing that no one else was increasing the bid, the host confidently struck the gavel. This tycoon merchant from the West Sea is truly generous. Let's hope he can leave the port safely with his newly acquired sword, the host said excitedly, his earnings from the auction considerable. Although the host hoped for Gates' safe departure, he secretly wondered if Gates would be able to leave unscathed, given that many envious individuals had left during the auction. Gates, who had been seated quietly on stage, stood and nodded toward the host. "Thank you. I will take good care of this sword," he said before gracefully. The audience below erupted into chatter. 200 million bellies, that's insane. I heard this guy is a tycoon from the West Sea, no wonder he's so wealthy. Aranakiri was the final item of this auction, and with the fall of the gavel, the auction successfully ended. Rhodes stood up and walked out, preparing to leave Saboadi early the next day. Of course, he planned to take advantage of his time and tour the Saboadi archipelago, at least trying all the famous local snacks. Soros glared at Gates before walking out as well. Gates, however, was indifferent. He was leaving today anyway, so what could Soros do to him? Gates was not afraid of official power. As a tycoon from the West Sea, he had connections with many allied countries in the West Sea and even the world government. As for underground matters, he had recently recruited 2 great mercenaries, claiming that he was not afraid of the small thieves on the Saboadi archipelago. The sky gradually darkened. With Soros as his companion, Rhodes leisurely walked around, eating various famous foods. It could be said that Soros was a very qualified subordinate. With him, Rhodes didn't have to spend money on various consumption in Saboadi, and he was familiar with the place, knowing 1 or 2 things about all kinds of things. As they walked, they suddenly heard a burst of discussion in front of them. "I heard that the guy from the West Sea was targeted by the guys from Talon. They're in for it. Serves them right for being arrogant in Saboadi. Don't you know, this guy was being showy at the auction earlier." Hearing this, Soros burst out laughing. "Hey, how bold he acted back then, now he has to spit it all out." Rhodes looked in the direction of the commotion and saw a crowd gathered nearby. In the open space ahead, it seemed that 2 groups were facing off. "Haha, this guy is really unlucky." Soros took pleasure in others' misfortune. "These guys are very strong, they specialize in doing dirty work for the Donquixote family. Even if Gates, that scumbag, can handle Talon, he'll probably be taken care of by the Donquixote family executives who will arrive later." "Who's been stationed in Saboadi recently?" "I think it's the top executive Diamante. That guy is tough to deal with, very cruel." "Haha, even with Gates' status and position, he'll probably only be able to save his own life at most." Soros finally spoke out and laughed with a bit of a triumphant look. "The Shishibukai, especially the Donquixote family, is not something a small merchant can fight against. Even if they really killed Gates, it would probably be just that, at most condemned by the allied countries of the West Sea." Thinking this way, Soros felt a bit sympathetic towards his peer, feeling that Gates was quite pitiful. "Let's go and take a look," Rhodes said. As soon as they came closer, they saw the big fat sheep, Gates, who had waved around his money like dirt at the auction earlier, now in despair. Gates, who had been so full of energy and had crushed all the wealthy nobles at the auction, had a very unpleasant expression on his face and was only accompanied now by 2 severely injured bodyguards. "Damn it!" Gates cursed inwardly. He had been cautious enough, but in the end, he had still been intercepted at the port. It was probably a real underworld boss who had managed to find out where his ship was so quickly. Despair washed over him. Fortunately, the 2 new hires he had made were both professional and didn't consider betrayal even in such a dire situation. Of course, Gates was no fool. He knew that if things truly became hopeless, they would probably run faster than anyone else. "The captain said that if you willingly hand over 70% of your wealth, we will let you leave safely," a young man with a very gloomy aura spoke up. "Don't think about running. Your ship has already been burned by our people." With just one statement, he almost completely cut off any possible escape route for Gates. The young man could be called ruthless. A hint of darkness flickered in Gates' eyes, but he was no stranger to turbulence, and he wasn't panicked at the moment. His eyes were flickering as if he were looking for a way out. "Chaos, I must cause chaos." In a flash of thought, he yelled out, "This is a great sword, one of only 21 in the world, it's called Aranakiri, and it's worth 200 million bellies." At the same time, he unhesitatingly threw the Aranakiri sword in his hand toward the crowd of onlookers nearby. Hearing Gates' words and then seeing the Aranakiri sword in mid-air, the crowd's hearts skipped a beat, but only for a moment. Driven by their desire to survive, the onlookers retreated in unison. Then, the Aranakiri sword fell to the ground with a thud, revealing a small section of its blade, and reflecting a faint blue glow. Gates. He had obviously underestimated the deterrent power of the Dongquixote family and overestimated the courage of this ordinary crowd. Ha ha ha! The young man almost burst out laughing at the sight. He coldly said, as expected, "You are bold. If that's the case, then hand over 90% of your wealth or you will die." Gates almost vomited blood. The onlookers, on the other hand, looked at him innocently. Who would dare to mess with the Talon, let alone the Dongquixote family behind him? The scene was extremely awkward. It was as if a group of black crows flew past from the sky. Until a figure suddenly reached out and grasped the Aranakiri in its hand. Only a clanging sound was heard. The person easily pulled out the Aranakiri, its azure blade reflected a faint glow, almost as if the sparks of electricity were dancing. It was clear that he was simply holding it, yet Aranakiri trembled intensely. Whistling. The sword's fierce hum echoed throughout the area, and all present seemed to feel a faint sense of joy. This person was none other than Rhodes. He held the Aranakiri aloft, examining it closely, and suddenly, a sincere smile appeared on his face. Fate had come knocking and, as expected, no one could stop it. The sword fits him perfectly. As he was basking in this joy, a cold voice interrupted him. "Kid, if you cherish your life, put down the sword now. And, I can spare your life." Rhodes heard this and tilted his head, and replied lightly. "I picked this up on my own merit, why should I put it down?" Chapter 84. Strange request. Why should I relinquish something I acquired through my own merit? As soon as he spoke, the entire room was enveloped in silence. All eyes were fixed upon Rhodes in disbelief. This young man, having emerged from the rags, dared to confront Talon head-on, a representative of the Dongquixote family. Even Saurus was taken aback. Rhodes's sword had inflicted a heavy blow on a sea king, leaving Saurus deeply shocked, and his mysterious background made Saurus consider allying with him. However, the Dongquixote, or rather, Doflamingo, was a true big shot. In the world of pirates, the Dongquixote family is ranked second only to the four emperors. In fact, due to Doflamingo's special unknown status, the family held sway with the world government and wielded influence throughout the world, particularly in chaotic places like Saboati. Even the common folk were filled with trepidation and dared not get involved in this incident, a testament to the family's power. Talon's eyebrows arched as his eyes shone with a cold light. The incident with Gates was merely a robbery, a routine operation for them. But Rhodes's words were a true slap in the face. Not just to Talon, but to the reputation of the Dongquixote family as well. Odin, both of you, go and take care of this arrogant brat. As soon as he spoke, two men jumped out from behind him, both dressed in rough animal skins and wielding large swords. These two men were the Dongquixote family's elites, Os and Odin. One man brandished a long sword, while the other wielded a giant sword, both clearly adept at utilizing raw strength. "This brat can be taken down by me alone." "Boss, what's the point of calling us both out?" one of the men groused. "He committed a taboo. Whoever deals with him first will be generously rewarded," Talon said coolly. Os and Odin exchanged glances before leering at Rhodes with malevolent intent, cackling grotesquely. "Such a comely little white face, is far superior to the ones back home. Brothers, we can truly savor this moment." Yet they didn't finish their sentence. With a swish, a bolt of lightning shot by in front of them. It shone brilliantly, yet was gone in an instant. Many people thought it was an illusion and were left confused. But then Os and Odin both shuddered. A wound on their neck rapidly spread, spewing out gouts of blood. The two men looked terrified and instinctively reached for their necks. But before their hands could even move, their heads had already tumbled from their bodies. Blood was sprayed everywhere. The entire field fell silent. Everyone stared at the young man in white, who seemed to have barely moved, and saw him say with some delight, as expected of a great sword, "It's fast and sharp as advertised." He held the sword in his hand and scrutinized it closely, not missing a single detail or grain. The more he looked, the more excited he became. Aranakiri appeared to be inherently attuned to the power of thunder, and in its transmission, was clearly far superior to the former fine long sword. The speed of that sword just now was not only due to Aranakiri's own strength but also due to the enhancement of lightning that Rhodes channeled through its blade. With a snap of his finger, a crisp hum emanated from the sapphire sword, its surface emitting a faint glow and eliciting a feeling of joy within those present. While Aranakiri was pleased, on the opposite side, Talon and the others were filled with dread, their scalps were tingling and their backs chilled. Talon, in particular. Os and Odin had barely taken 2 steps when they were suddenly killed. As the 2 heads landed, they faced Talon, their gazes fixed upon him as if silently accusing him, nearly causing Talon's soul to flee his body. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva and was about to utilize the Donquixote family's reputation to intimidate Rhodes, yet he suddenly noticed that the latter seemed to be ignoring him. This caused his heart to skip a beat, and he quickly silenced himself. Talon, with his vast experience, knew that this territory belonged to the Donquixote family, and the current situation was likely already known to the higher-ups. When the main force arrives, this presumptuous youth, Rhodes, will not be spared. Talon returned to his senses, his thoughts wicked as he absorbed the scene before him. And so, the atmosphere abruptly calmed. Rhodes carelessly examined his new sword, exuding an air of ease and relaxation. Talon, meanwhile, hung his head low, effectively concealing the malice in his eyes as he waited patiently for backup. Time ticked away, 1 minute, 1 second. However, events did not unfold as Talon had imagined. Before Diamante could arrive, Rhodes sheathed his sword with a loud clang, called out to Saurus, and began walking toward the edge of the crowd as if to leave. Talon's brow furrowed. He calculated the time and believed Diamante should arrive soon, so his confidence soared. He approached Rhodes, stopping several dozen meters away, and shouted, "Do you really think you can just walk away so easily after disrespecting the Donquixote family?" His demeanor was arrogant and his tone haughty, but speaking from such a distance did not carry much conviction. Even the passers-by couldn't bear to watch and secretly chuckled. "What did he say?" Halfway through the sentence, Talon's vision suddenly blurred, and he saw the figure in the distance fade away. Then, on his neck, a deep blue sword blade suddenly appeared. The piercing sharpness made Talon feel a chill down his spine as if he were about to join Os and Odin in the next moment, even without actually being touched by the blade. Talon swallowed and opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but seeing the enigmatic expression on Rhodes's face, he didn't manage to say anything. For he perceived that the youth before him was a veritable madman, unafraid of heaven or earth. If he dared utter a single false word, it was likely that he would meet his demise in the next instant. Just as he was drenched in the cold sweat, feeling as though the days stretched on interminably, a distant, icy voice emitted, carrying a commanding tone. "Brat, if you have the guts, cut me down with that sword and let me see your mettle." Upon hearing this familiar voice, Talon's countenance shook violently, and he straightened himself haughtily. "That's right, I'll stand here motionless and I dare you to slice." Splat! A head flew up. Blood spattered everywhere. Rhodes fell back, avoiding the splattered blood, and shook his head lightly, stating, "I've never heard such a strange request before." "You're Diamante, right?" Rhodes gazed at the sword-wielding man in the red cloak who had just arrived. This individual was none other than the highest-ranking member of the Donquixote family, Diamante, a paramecia devil fruit user. He had the ability to transform any object he touched, from stones to steel, and even his own body, into a soft, cloth-like form. His garments were all made of extremely sturdy special steel, and although they appeared to be cloth, they were in reality highly resilient and possessed an unbelievable defensive power. Chapter 85. Diamante. Rhodes's voice resounded across the open field, leaving all present stunned and motionless. If Rhodes had killed Talon before Diamante's arrival, it would have been a mere collision, not worthy of much attention. However, with Diamante, the highest-ranking member of the Donquixote family, present, Rhodes's slaying of Talon was a blatant and outright affront. The atmosphere grew heavy with a sense of foreboding as a cold killing intent and malevolent aura permeated the air. Diamante's face darkened to the color of a pot bottom, his eyes flickering with a bloodthirsty gleam. "This is it," said some. "We're in for it now," said others. "This young man is too disrespectful," added a few. In the back, Sora's face changed dramatically. After a moment of contemplation, he shook his head and sighed before retreating. Clearly, with his status and position, he had no right to speak in front of Diamante. All he could do now was hope for the best. The field fell into a tense silence, the oppressive feeling of suffocation reminiscent of the calm before a storm. Quick, let's get out of here. The onlookers retreated, leaving a wide open space. In a flash, only Rhodes and the members of the Don Quixote family, including Diamante, remained on the open field. Although he was vastly outnumbered, Rhodes stood tall with his sword, his expression remaining serene as his eyes shone with a sharp edge. He was not one to back down from a fight, and if he couldn't even stand up to someone like Diamante, one of Shishibuki's subordinates, how could he ever hope to reach the pinnacle and go head-to-head with legendary figures like the four emperors and their top commanders? What was the point of training without meeting formidable opponents to challenge him? Under the scrutiny of all present, Diamante surprisingly didn't attack right away. He looked at Rhodes and felt a sense of familiarity as if he had seen him somewhere before. Suddenly, realization dawned on his face as he sneered, "So it's you, the little brat who caused Lao Ji's capture. You should have stayed hidden in Jun's lap, yet you dared to show your face on the sea again. You truly have no fear of death." He spoke coldly. Lao Ji held a high position in the Don Quixote family, and his arrest had caused quite a stir. While the Don Quixote family was busy trying to rescue Lao Ji from prison, they also conducted a thorough investigation into the incident and learned about the existence of a man named Rhodes. He was rumored to be a sword genius with an extremely powerful thunder sword intention. To torture and kill a genius, what a delightful pastime! Diamante licked his lips, his eyes filled with undisguised killing intent. Half Moon. Glaive. Diamante slowly unsheathed his sword, the blade glowing with a cold light. Rhodes's eyes narrowed as he prepared for battle. As Diamante's sword descended, a dazzling green-blue sword aura shot forth, slicing through the earth as if it were tofu and exuding an aura of invincibility as it roared toward Rhodes. This was pure swordsmanship at its finest, and Diamante was clearly a formidable swordsman. Though Diamante doesn't have a prominent role in the original story, as the highest-ranking member of the Don Quixote family and a master of swordsmanship and devil fruit abilities, he is at least a vice-admiral level presence, otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to maintain control on Dressrosa. "Oh, Diamante-sama is going all out from the start, leaving no room for error," some remarked. "It's a shame, really. A young man like this, who was able to defeat Loag, would likely have become a big shot in a few years. It's a pity he had to meet Diamante-sama now, or he probably would have had a bright future," said others. "It's better for him to die quickly rather than suffer a worse fate if he lives," added a few. The Don Quixote followers who had come with Diamante all wore expressions of bloodthirst and excitement as if they had already witnessed the scene of Rhodes being split into two by the sword aura. Whoosh! Before the sword aura even reached him, the wild-winded stirred rushed towards Rhodes, blowing his black hair backward and revealing his shining, pitch-black eyes. This level of swordsmanship! Rhodes shook his head lightly as he gazed upon the seemingly grand green-blue sword aura. He grasped the sword handle and waved a light and effortless slash. Lightning! As the sword swung down, the dazzling silver-white sword energy was like a bright silver moon soaring through the sky, rippling with a tingling sharpness. In an instant, two completely different sword energies collided, producing an earth-shaking hum. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. The two sword energies cut and grappled with each other, the sound of clashing and bursting constantly ringing out. Finally, they exploded and burst out, releasing a circle of terrifying waves that swept out. This astonishing phenomenon even caused the nearby houses to make creaking noises as if they were about to collapse. It also made the spectators' hair stand on end, and they quickly retreated, with some of the more timid ones no longer daring to watch the battle. Almost in the next moment, the collision produced a result. To everyone's amazement, a weak silver-white sword energy suddenly burst out of the aftermath and continued to slash toward Diamante. It was Rhodes who had come out on top. What? Diamante's eyes widened in disbelief as he looked at the scene. He had never expected that his full-strength slash would be blocked by Rhodes. Blocked it! The members of the Don Quixote family in the back all had looks of disbelief on their faces. Although Diamante's swordsmanship was not considered a core technique, combined with his almost honed to extreme physical strength, it was not a stretch to say that he could cut a marine's warship in half with one sword strike. As expected of a disciple of the great sword master, Jun, "I admit I underestimated you," Diamante remarked as he crushed the remaining sword chi with his blade and fixed a cold gaze on Rhodes, his voice dripping with malevolence. "So this is all there is to the so-called highest member," Rhodes replied, his sword still in hand and his expression remaining undisturbed. But all present could detect a hint of pride emanating from him, and rightfully so. To stand against the highest member of the Donquixote family, Diamante, and withstand a full-force attack while even gaining the upper hand, was a level of strength that not even this year's new sensation, White Horse Cavendish, could boast. Not to mention, Rhodes was clearly much younger than Cavendish, meaning he had even more potential. If Cavendish has the potential to become a renowned pirate in the future, then Rhodes has the potential to become a legendary figure standing at the peak. All present felt that this trip was worth it, to witness the emergence of such a stunning character. "Oh, is this the young man that Shucky spoke of?" "Not bad at all," a silver-haired old man remarked from atop a rooftop, taking a sip of his wine. "That little kid, Jun, actually took on a disciple. I'm a bit envious," he continued. "There are very few great sword masters who have reached the peak of swordsmanship, and most of them have a lonely and cold feeling of inadequacy. Even if they don't know each other, he couldn't help but feel envious that he wasn't the one encountering such a disciple." "But Diamante's strength is far from just this," Rayleigh said, his eyes shining with a sharp light. "Let this old man taste more the true power of your lightning sword intent." Chapter 86. Thunder Dragon. The battle rages on, and the Saboati archipelago is no stranger to madmen. Stronger individuals continue to flock to the scene, watching the battle with great interest. "Hey, isn't that Diamante? Who would dare to provoke him? Could he be the new star of the year? Are you kidding? The new star? Anyone worth their salt knows that a new star can only cause a stir in the first half of the Grand Line at best. Diamante is a well-known figure in the New World, capable of easily defeating someone like Cavendish, with one hand." The crowd is abuzz with speculation about Rhodes's identity. For ordinary people in this world, the most straightforward and brute method of achieving fame is to force the world government to put a bounty on your head. The higher the bounty, the higher the fame, and the easier it is to be remembered. Otherwise, the best thing that will happen to you is to be mentioned in one of the small articles in the newspaper, but who reads those? Rhodes lacks a bounty and has not done anything noteworthy enough to make headlines, so only a few people know of him. What's the point of being strong? Being handsome is the most important thing. Cavendish is the best. Exactly, this handsome pirate is not something the likes of you rough folk could understand. Ah, my Cavendish! Upon hearing the derogatory comments about Cavendish, some female fans become disgruntled and shoot daggers with their eyes. Upon seeing this, the big men before them suddenly quiet down. They looked at these women with their large waists and ferocious appearance wielding axes and whips, and all secretly sighed. For this legendary pirate nobleman, they only had admiration, and a faint sense of pity for the poor guy. At this moment, on the battlefield, hearing Rhodes's words, Diamante sneered and said nothing more. The collision just now had indeed put him at a disadvantage, so if he was suppressed, he would just fight back. Cruel words should be spoken while stepping on the enemy's head. "Ah!" He lightly shouted and suddenly activated his flying fruit ability. "Army Bandera!" Buzz! Almost in the next moment, the ground within dozens of meters rippled suddenly, as if injected with a mysterious force. Under the surprised gazes of all present, the whole piece of land suddenly lifted off, like a piece of cloth fluttering in the wind. "It's here, Diamante's fruit ability. It's truly terrifying. There's no way to maintain balance in this situation. It looks like this battle is going to end." The Donquixote family members all showed a look of excitement as if they had already seen Rhodes being flattened by the flying land. But they didn't think that. Rhodes simply lightly stomped his foot and leaped into the air. He stepped on the moon step and easily avoided Diamante's fruit attack with a casual wave. "I see you know the moon step. But it's not easy to leverage your power in the air. Let's see how you handle this." As expected, Diamante snorted coldly and suddenly swung his sword. Half Moon Glaive. A grand green sword energy swept out as if it would split the sky and earth in two. Different from the previous one, this strike was Diamante's ultimate burst, using all the sword skills he had learned in his lifetime to the extreme, reaching the limits of his speed and strength. He wanted to cut Rhodes down from the sky with one sword and restore his majesty, proving himself. Buzz! Seeing the green sword energy slice towards the sky, almost illuminating the dark night, everyone couldn't help but sigh, feeling that Rhodes was doomed. "Is this all you've got?" Rhodes suddenly laughed. He laughed and shook his head. "I thought the highest officer of the Donquixote family would be much more reliable, but it turns out you're just a fame-seeking opportunist. You think you can show off with this petty sword technique? I really overestimated you. It doesn't matter. Let me show you the true art of swordsmanship." Rhodes stood with his sword, proud and aloof. In the shocked and confused gazes of the crowd, he calmly said 2 words. Thunder Dragon. In an instant, the void came alive with electricity and the thunder exploded as if it were broad daylight. And as he was bathed in the thunder, he swung his sword. Boom! It was like a clap of thunder on a clear day. A thunderous dragon formed from this strike and an energy cut was shot out and serpentined in the air for 9 turns like a snake. Diamante unleashed the strongest sword chi of his lifetime, but it almost had no chance once it met the dragon thunder, dissipating instantly like papier-mâché. The thunder dragon didn't let up, roaring down as if a divine disaster had descended, destroying everything in its path. This isn't possible! Diamante exclaimed, his eyes wide with shock. Nevertheless, he dared not take the attack lightly and stomped his foot fiercely, causing the earth to rise up like a curtain, layer upon layer. But how could these ordinary earth walls stand up to the terrifying thunder dragon from the sky? Puff puff puff! The earth walls were torn apart like a ruin, and in the blink of an eye, the thunderbolt wrapped in violent force broke through the 9 layers of the earth walls. It crashed onto Diamante's sword blade with a loud bang, releasing the thunder dragon's final burst of power. Diamante was sent flying, spraying blood from his mouth as he crashed into a shop, causing the building to collapse. As the earth shook fiercely, accompanied by a blanket of smoke and dust, the large tracts of earth controlled by Diamante also fell, bursting out with a series of rumbling noises. Many of the wealthy nobles who were leisurely enjoying themselves on the Cebuati archipelago suddenly noticed that the cups in their hands were shaking, creating ripples on the surface. Is this an earthquake? Everyone was puzzled and rushed outside. The many spectators at the scene were left completely stunned. In mid-air, a figure clad in white was surrounded by thunder, standing tall with a sword in hand, and a cloud of dust at his feet. The sky was illuminated by this person, taking on a deep blue hue. The thunder that tore through the darkness was intimidating. Such powerful thunderous energy. Could he be a Logia type user of the thunder fruit? No wonder he's so powerful at such a young age. This is almost an unbeatable Logia ability, even the current 3 admirals are not as skilled as him. Everyone's mouths gaped open in shock, their hearts trembling, and they didn't even notice the dust they were inhaling. What did I just see? He shot out a thunder dragon with 1 strike. West Blue's wealthiest man, Gates, was left speechless. Even Diamante was beaten by him. Soros also swallowed his saliva at this moment. Not only was he taken aback, but the usually composed Rayleigh, who was calmly drinking nearby, even spat out his drink. He got his wish and laid his eyes on the rumored demonic thunder sword intent. But this encounter didn't go as he had imagined, with him acting like an old man while pointing out mistakes. Instead, he was shocked like any ordinary passerby. Who is this guy? Rayleigh, the vice-captain of the Roger Pirates, the legendary Dark King, a man who once split an island with a single sword strike, is one of the world's top sword masters. Even in his later years, he can still effortlessly deflect Admiral Kizaru's attack. No way, right? This cannot be sword intent. Rayleigh blinked, his face was filled with a "you've got to be kidding me" expression as he mutters to himself unconsciously. Chapter 87. The Fall of Diamante, Rhodes' Unstoppable Might. Diamante, one of the Don Quixote family's cotters, unleashed a powerful attack. However, with a swift slash of Rhodes' sword, Diamante was sent flying through the air, a sight that none of the Don Quixote family members had expected. In their eyes, Diamante was a true force to be reckoned with, a heavyweight among strong men, second only to the infamous Doflamingo. "We've run into a tough opponent," muttered the junior members of the Don Quixote family, exchanging worried glances. Sensing that things were not going their way, they decided it was time to call for backup. Of course, reaching out to Cebuati's headquarters for assistance would be futile at this point, so they turned to the world government for help. Due to Doflamingo's unknown powerful status, their relationship with the government was delicate at best, but they knew that help would most likely be granted, if not graciously. Doflamingo had risen to power by threatening the government, after all. As the smoke cleared, a tremor rumbled through the ruins of the house. Ah! Diamante slowly picked himself up, his eyes icy and filled with anger and shock. At his level, his strength had reached its peak, and all he desired was fame and the realization of his dreams. But now, he had been publicly humiliated by Rhodes, a shame that would haunt him for the rest of his days. "Oh, you want to continue? You're not convinced yet? Don't worry, I'll convince you." Rhodes smiled, revealing his pearly white teeth. With a swift step forward, he launched himself into the fray once more, determined to make Diamante submit. In an instant, a massive wave of energy swept through the air. At the same time, Rhodes closed the distance between himself and Diamante in a flash, landing on top of him like lightning and striking with his sword. Clang! The two men's swords clashed once again. This time, Diamante couldn't afford to underestimate Rhodes. He channeled all his power, pushing his Busos Hoku Haki to its limits, and swung his sword to meet Rhodes's attack. Clang! The sound of metal ringing out filled the air. In an instant, Diamante was forced back, unable to withstand Rhodes's sword. What immense strength! Diamante's heart was shaken, and his hands trembled slightly. How is this possible? I may not be strong, but he's only 17 or 18 years old and hasn't even reached his prime yet. How can he have so much strength? He couldn't comprehend it. He had seen many geniuses and monsters in his life, but none of them had ever had this kind of strength. These people usually had unique talents in swordplay or the development of devil fruits and often achieved what others couldn't in their entire lives at a very young age. But physical strength is not the same, it's impossible to progress rapidly, and only through daily training and perseverance can it be gradually improved. Normally, a person's physical strength will reach its peak in their 30s or 40s. Once you hit that milestone, you can only try what you have already achieved, and it's difficult to make further progress. But Rhodes was only 17 or 18 years old. Diamante couldn't fathom the idea of Rhodes reaching his peak, his physique honed to such a level of strength that it would rival that of the likes of Black Arm Zephyr or the King of the Beasts Kaido. He never imagined he would come across such a prodigious talent, but with the family already at odds with Rhodes, Diamante knew he had to snuff him out, and quick. Fly! Diamante shouted, letting go of his red cloak, the fabric fluttering in the wind. What appeared to be silk threads unraveled from the cloak and intertwined themselves around Rhodes. In reality, they were made of the toughest of steels. In a blink of an eye, Rhodes was ensnared by the steel threads, which seemed to pulsate with fierce energy, further hardening their grip. The threads layered themselves around Rhodes, trapping him in a cocoon of steel, like an insect caught in a spider's web. Interesting move, Rhodes remarked, his eyes alight with excitement. Diamante is truly a veteran of the sea. He had managed to improvise and develop his abilities to this extent, impressing Rhodes. These threads may seem flimsy, but together, they were a force to be reckoned with. The mere sight of this move would strike fear into the hearts of any mere mortal, ensuring their demise in an instant. But alas, your abilities are not yet advanced enough to control these threads from a distance. Also, these metal threads are conductive. Rhodes shook his head in mild disappointment. Suddenly, the faint glow of lightning that had been flickering over his body, roared to life, towering at a height of 3 meters. The fearsome arcs of electricity flickered wildly, spreading along the threads at an unimaginable speed in the blink of an eye. Diamante didn't even have a moment to let go of the threads before he was caught in the current. At this moment, his Busos Hoku Haki was mainly focused on the threads, leaving his body almost defenseless. Zzz! The raging lightning, accompanied by the terrifying heat of electricity, gave Diamante a taste of the electric chair. His hair stood on end, his eyes became white, his head was emitting heat, and his steel clothing was wildly conducting electricity, almost making him an imbecile. But he was still a formidable strongman. He gritted his teeth and broke the control of the threads despite the intense numbness and pain throughout his body. Dazzle! He stumbled backward, almost falling to the ground. However, fortune favors the strong-bodied pirates in this world, their vitality is truly astounding. Though Diamante's head had been ringing with electric shock, he still managed to break free, avoiding any threat to his life. But before he could catch his breath, an alarming sound of breaking air echoed in his ears and an overpowering presence rushed towards him. Diamante had no choice but to brace himself for battle. Despite his best efforts, he could barely fend off his opponent, forced to fight and retreat at the same time. The ground shook beneath them as they clashed. Every time swords were drawn, they left deep trenches in their wake. "This is too much," someone exclaimed, his voice trembling with awe. Before this moment, the people of Saboata had only known that the New World was incredibly powerful, a gathering place for the elite, far stronger than the first half of the Grand Line. But now, they were seeing the true extent of its power with their own eyes. The battle between Rhodes and Diamante was a true display of the might of the New World's strongest pirates. Their clashes sent shockwaves through the area, like two titanic bulldozers wreaking havoc without a care in the world. The sight caused many pirates who had planned to venture into the New World to feel a shiver of fear and hesitation. "Looks like we have what it takes to go to the New World," said one. "The old are done for, the future belongs to the young," said Rayleigh, taking a sip from his flask before hopping off the roof, and strolling away leisurely. But just as he left, the sounds of battle suddenly came to a halt. From the smoke emerged a figure, flying backward before skidding to a stop on the ground, lying there motionless like a dead dog. "Do you surrender now?" Rhodes said with a hint of a smirk as he walked out of the dust, his clothes perfectly untouched as if this battle had been nothing more than a casual walk. Chapter 88. Vendetta on the Archipelago. Diamante is a figure of the utmost prominence and a general of the highest caliber, possessing great strength in this sea. Though his swordsmanship may not have been as polished as Raiji's, and his strength ever so slightly inferior to Rhodes, he possessed the ability of the Hira Hira no Mi fruit to compensate. His overall combat prowess was not far off from that of the one-armed swordsman Raiji, and may even have had the edge in certain aspects. Had it not been for the cloak-wrought steel wire net that just so happened to conduct electricity and was intercepted by Rhodes, resulting in severe injuries, this battle may have had a far different outcome. In terms of physical endurance, though Rhodes had made significant strides, it was uncertain if he could have kept pace with the experienced and powerful Diamante. And in these parts, the Sabayati archipelago, with its years of machinations, it would not have been a surprise if allies of the Don Quixote family had intervened. Alas, it was not meant to be. Rhodes' tireless training and relentless pursuit of self-improvement had reaped bountiful rewards. Be it his body strength, swordsmanship, or his signature move the thunder power, any one of them would have been more than enough to earn him the title of a supernova-level individual. In combination, they had forged Rhodes into a monstrous talent the likes of which had never been seen before. At the tender age of 17, he had struck down Diamante, the Don Quixote family's highest-ranking officer, with unshakable confidence. The scene that now greeted the onlookers was one of complete and utter stillness. The only sound that echoed through the air was the steady tread of Rhodes' feet as he walked the ground. Not a soul dared to make a sound, not even to take a breath. Whether they be the outlaws of the Sabayati archipelago, the ruthless pirates, the powerful officials, or even members of the Don Quixote family, not a single one dared to speak. Don Quixote Doflamingo had not been seen much since he become one of the Shishibukai. Of the 4 highest-ranking officers, Virgo had infiltrated the Marines as a spy, Treble acted as a secretary or bodyguard-like presence, staying in the Dressrosa Palace to protect Sugar, and Pica controlled Dressrosa. In recent years, the one who had been out and about handling matters was primarily Diamante, the highest-ranking officer. Perhaps people did not know how powerful Don Quixote Doflamingo was, or how strong the Don Quixote family was, but they all knew how strong Diamante is. But in this very moment, after a fierce battle, that mighty figure's life and death were uncertain. Who would ever dare to face the sharp edge of this young man's swords after this? "I submit." Diamante barely lifted his head, his eyes filled with endless hatred and shame, but he was no longer the hot-headed youth he once was, he knew when to bend and when to stand firm. For now, he kept his silence, biding his time to preserve his life, but with the Don Quixote family's position of power and influence in the underworld, there were countless methods to eliminate Rhodes. The underworld is teeming with all kinds of sinisterly skilled assassins and hitmen, and when the time comes, you'll be begging for death. Diamante lowered his eyelids, hiding the malice that simmering within. In his mind, the submission would still ensure the safety of his life. After all, he's from the Don Quixote family and their captain is none other than Doflamingo, one of the Shishibukai. Diamante had tasted defeats before, but those who dared to challenge him would usually falter and back down. Furthermore, a mere youth like Rhodes would be more than satisfied with just the flattery of defeating someone like himself. Diamante-sama. Many members of the Don Quixote family exclaimed in shock, but couldn't help but lower their heads. Even the highest-ranking officer could only lower his head and bow, what more could they do? Submit and die. To their surprise, Rhodes thrust his sword forward, striking Diamante's heart directly, the terrifying energy burst forth, instantly crushing it. "How dare you?" Diamante's eyes bulged, not yet dead, his mouth continuously bleeding, and his face filled with an incredulous expression. He was the highest-ranking officer of the Don Quixote family, one of the Shishibukai Doflamingo's elite, and his position was revered. Even government officials of the world government, and even some kings of allied countries, would treat him with respect upon seeing him. But Rhodes was resolute in his determination to kill him, succinct and decisive. "You The members of the Don Quixote family seethed with rage, as Diamante humbly submitted, yet Rhodes still brazenly struck him down in front of everyone. What, you don't agree? Rhodes drew his sword, the blue blade still gleaming and spotless, not a drop of blood staining it. He stood tall with a sword in hand and a smile on his face as he looked upon the Don Quixote family members. But this smile, to them, was akin to the grin of a demon. The Don Quixote family members, one by one, had their expressions contorted, taking a step back as a wave of fear and terror swept over them, replacing the brief anger. How dare they provoke such a madman? This was a being who would kill even the highest-ranking officer of the Don Quixote family without hesitation. In the crowd, a man in a white mask who had just arrived saw this scene and couldn't help but blink, halting his steps and muttering to himself. It's not my fault, it's Diamante's fault for being too weak, I just got here and he's already dead. That's how I'll report it. With that, the CP agent shook his head, slowly withdrawing from the crowd. As for the remaining small fry of the Don Quixote family, the CP agent was too lazy to bother with them. This level of strength was not worth inciting the wrath of this madman Rhodes. The crux of the matter is that he may not necessarily emerge victorious. CP's special agent was quite perceptive, he slipped away like a ghost. Dead, he's dead, Diamante is dead. Soros muttered in a trembling voice, his mind reeling in shock. He could never have imagined that Rhodes would dare to publicly slay Diamante right before their eyes. Could it be that he has some sort of powerful backer, one that would allow him to sneer at the Don Quixote family? Even the West Sea's wealthiest man, Gates, was left reeling in shock. No matter how much wealth one amasses, it will always fall short when held up against true strength. He murmured, his expression one of resignation. The two bodyguards were also left speechless, whispering among themselves, "Boss, you were the catalyst for this outbreak of violence. This young man may have some sort of backing, but you do not. We must flee Sabayati archipelago with all due haste. The sea is wide and the Don Quixote family will not be able to pursue us easily. As long as we can make it back to the West Sea, we can seek refuge under the royal family." Gates was startled upon hearing this, stammering, "You're right, I'll be leaving to find a ship." As Rhodes finished the remaining members of the Don Quixote family with his 2 strikes, bringing this event to its satisfying conclusion. Rhodes gave his sword a shake, the sound of it being sheathed echoed through the air, and he paused for a moment in contemplation. All eyes were on him as he suddenly made his way toward Gates, who was attempting to slip away unnoticed. Gates was caught off guard, froze in his tracks, his steps hanging suspended in the air for a moment before he retreated silently. This is it, this guy is the type who holds a grudge, isn't he? Gates was drenched in sweat, wanting to say something, but unable to find the words. Though this conflict had been ignited by Aranakiri, it had ultimately been sparked by the incident with Loag. But at the source, it was because of Gates' misfortune. If Rhodes truly intends to hold him accountable, Gates would be at a loss for words, and could only accept defeat. Chapter 89. The Unconditional Love of the Master. Rhodes, in truth, did not spare a second thought about Gates, let alone that this was a bridge he had willingly built. The Don Quixote family had a score to settle with him, and with their tyrannical ways, there would always be conflicts in the future, even without Gates' incident. It just happened a bit sooner than expected. Furthermore, thanks to this incident, he acquired a perfectly fitting greatsword for free. Rhodes was in a great mood. Killing with a sword was immensely satisfying, and taking out his enemies was twice the pleasure. "Are you heading back to the West Sea? Care to have me tag along?" As Gates was still in shock, he didn't expect Rhodes to approach him with such a calm tone, leaving him frozen in place like a statue. He had thought that such a young and renowned powerhouse would have been incredibly arrogant. Gates, being a business leader, soon regained his composure, bowing respectfully, "Your Highness, to have you aboard my ship, is an honor of mine." Gates looked overjoyed, and could not dare not show it. How could he refuse? Rhodes had just killed many before his eyes, and their corpses still lay where they fell. Rhodes nodded, he prided himself on being persuasive, if words failed, his sword would speak for him. Please, follow me, I will have a new ship ready within 3 days." Gates spoke with the utmost deference. Initially, he has planned to acquire a commonplace sailing ship to hasten his return to the West Sea, but with Rhodes joining him, he dared not to be half-hearted in his efforts. Rod nodded with a hint of apathy, following Gates forward without a second glance back at Soros. "Some things, once missed, are lost forever. Sora's decision to step down against Diamante was a common response, but it left a sour taste nonetheless. After all, Rhodes had saved his life before, yet he didn't even utter a single word. In the distance, Soros opened his mouth but failed to say anything, ultimately sighing in disappointment. Rhodes' attitude was crystal clear. His mind was consumed with regret. Oh well, it doesn't matter, maybe he won't even be able to withstand the relentless pursuit of the Don Quixote family. Soros whispered consolingly to himself, but his eyes were filled with remorse. He, who was accustomed to investing in young powerhouses, how could he not see Rhodes' potential? At this age, after defeating Diamante, becoming a powerhouse like Doflamingo in the future, was as easy as a breeze. Even reaching the peak was not out of the question. Having good relations with such figures would bring immeasurable benefits, that any merchant in the world would rush towards, yet he let the opportunity slip through his fingers. With Rhodes and the others leaving, this battle was finally over. But the impact it caused was like a raging storm, spreading throughout the world. The underground realm, where the Don Quixote family held the most influence, bore the brunt of it, followed by the entire Grand Sea route, and eventually, even the far-off seas on the horizon were affected. News agencies clamored to report on it. Perhaps the average person still couldn't understand the young and rising swordsman Rhodes, but those with a slightly higher status knew of him, understood him, and were shocked by him. Rhodes, at not even 20 years of age, was famous throughout the world. The New World, Marine G5 branch. Jun stood tall, draped in righteousness, gazing out the window towards the distant sea. Her striking figure held no expression on her elegant face, revealing no hint of emotion. Being in charge of the G5 branch may seem like a heavy burden, but in reality, it was quite effortless. The New World's marine base was a military installation to begin with, lacking the responsibility of protecting islands or civilians. Normally, there wasn't much to do and there were many marine captains below her in ranks to handle trivial matters. Someone like Jun, in actuality, was only responsible for intimidation. Furthermore, Jun had a very capable and beautiful female vice-captain, which allowed her to leisurely watch the sea every day. At that moment, footsteps could be heard outside the door, followed by Eleanor pushing it open. Something big has happened. Oh. Jun's expression remained calm and unfazed. Eleanor gritted her teeth, her superior couldn't be bothered and the problem fell on her lap. She absent-mindedly touched her hairline, grumbling to herself, "You must know that the center of the problem is that kid, Rhodes." Jun's blank eyes suddenly jolted, as if a sword light had flickered in mid-air, slicing through the atmosphere with a sharp sound. She turned her piercing gaze towards Eleanor, her eyes seemed to pierce right through her. Eleanor shrunk under the pressure. Only then did Jun realize her action and casually withdrew her aura. What happened? Eleanor grumbled to herself, feeling gloomy. Jun wasn't like this before, she always felt that Rhodes took away all the love. She felt like an abandoned cat, whispering, "That guy killed the Don Quixote family's highest executive, Diamante." Jun heard this news and fell into a contemplative silence, nodding slightly. It appears that his power has seen a significant boost as of late. Eleanor was left speechless. Was this what Jun was most concerned about? She looked at Jun's serene expression, and the hint of pride and satisfaction in her eyes couldn't be missed, but Eleanor couldn't help but retort. Diamante is the face of the Don Quixote family, Doflamingo is not known for his benevolence, Rhodes may be in for some dire times. That's true. Jun's tone was particularly upbeat, she gestured with her hand and said. "Come, prepare the ship, we're going for a patrol near Dressrosa, we're going to capture some pirates. I haven't been to sea in a while, my hand is itching for a battle, I always feel like I want to cut something." Eleanor. Dressrosa. In the upper echelons of the palace, in a dimly lit room. 4 luxurious chairs were placed here, each engraved with a spade, heart, club, and diamond. Each one represents a top official. These 4 can be considered the backbone of the Don Quixote family. Without their support, Doflamingo would not have been able to ascend the throne so seamlessly. Therefore, even with his tyrannical and cruel nature as a celestial dragon, he could not accept what happened to his subordinates. Lao Ji was imprisoned because of him, and Diamante even died in battle. Is he trying to provoke me? Doflamingo spoke with a serene demeanor, his features betraying no trace of emotion. However, the atmosphere in the room took on a suffocating quality, as if a tempest was brewing. The already dimly lit room felt as if it were on the brink of the apocalypse. Even the members of the Don Quixote family standing in the room, powerful figures in their own right, did not dare to utter a word, each one of them sweating profusely, as if they were being hunted by a prehistoric monster, death looming over them at any moment. The atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. At that moment, Treble entered the room in a hurry, urgently saying, "Doflamingo, a marine's warship of the rank of an admiral is patrolling near the coast. It appears to be equipped with heavy artillery. Based on my observation, it should be the Vice Admiral, Jun." His words caused the air to get colder still, like a harbinger of doom. The atmosphere suddenly came to a standstill before quickly dissipating like spring snow. Doflamingo's face twisted with anger at that instant. Chapter 90. His first bounty, 1 billion belly. In the waters off the coast of Dressrosa, a sense of unease washed over Eleanor as she turned to her captain. "Are we really sure about this?" she queried, her tone heavy with reservation. "This is the territory of one of the Shishibukai, appointed by the world government. We can't just go around interfering with them." But Jun was unperturbed, her voice calm and steady as she replied, "Don't worry. I'm just helping to eliminate some local dangers and clear the shipping lanes." No sooner had the words left her mouth, than a massive sea king breached the surface of the water, its body stretching for dozens of meters. Like a miniature mountain, it charged toward the marine's ship, which was a mere fraction of its size. A blinding light erupted from nowhere, slicing through the sea king as if it were butter, bisecting the creature with ease. Blood and guts spilled out like a deluge, raining down upon the waters below. The sea king let out a mournful cry, before crashing back into the sea with a deafening roar, creating towering waves that rocked the marine's ship. But the light did not stop there, it continued its relentless advance, cutting through the thick clouds above as if nothing would stop it from reaching the sun. It was as if a sword of pure energy had cleaved the very sky in two. The concentrated sword aura was almost palpable, leaving all who witnessed it in awe. From the summit of the palace, Doflamingo surveyed the scene before him, his anger slowly dissipating as he pushed aside the thought of personally hunting down Rhodes. "That insane woman," Treble murmured, wiping the sweat from his brow. If it had been one of the current 3 admirals, they wouldn't have caused them much concern, as those individuals were known for their restraint and adherence to a code of conduct. They wouldn't actively harm one of the Shishibukai. But Jun was different. Women are already hard to understand. Powerful women, even more so. As for a woman who has reached the pinnacle of power, her level of caprice was such that even Doflamingo had to yield to her, and he knew of her powerful connections. One was a vice admiral who had been in love with her for a lifetime. Another was almost like a sister to her, one of the major figures in the Marines, a former vice admiral who had actually once chased after Doflamingo. Just thinking about it gives Doflamingo a headache. He silently retreated to his chamber to ponder. Vengeance and killing her in return was impossible. However, the underworld places great importance on reputation and infamy. If he just accepts the death of one of his highest officials without repercussions, no one would ever take him seriously, let alone respect him. It would even affect his family and business connections. But if he acted personally, Jun would probably tear down Dressrosa the next day, hunting him down to the ends of the earth, and who would be able to stop the killing intent of a sword master? "Let's place a bounty on Rhodes' head in the underworld," Doflamingo suggested, his voice heavy with contemplation. He turned to Treble, his gaze cold and calculating as he spoke. "The reward will be a whopping 1 billion belly." The mere mention of this figure sent shockwaves through the room. 1 billion belly was an astronomical sum, one that was typically reserved for only the most notorious and dangerous of pirates. Even the likes of Charlotte Katakuri, vice-captain of one of the Yonko, had a bounty that barely exceeded this amount. Jack the Drought, one of the 3 disasters, had a bounty of only 1 billion belly. Doflamingo's own bounty during his prime had never reached such heights. At 1 billion belly, even the top-ranked assassins in the underworld will come running, aside from the Killing King, ex-Drake. Treble sneered, a twisted smile playing at his lips as if he already envisioned Rhodes' demise. The assassins in the underworld were known to be powerful foes, with methods that were both devious and deadly. They were experts in using weapons with high technology, deadly poisons, and other covered means of killing. Some even possessed dangerous abilities. When they were truly sinister, they could even take out high-ranking officers of the Marines. It was said that ex-Drake, the world's top-ranked assassin known as the Killing King, had infiltrated the Holy Land of Marijoa using his special superhuman abilities, and assassinated high-ranking members of the world government before disappearing, leaving the entire world in shock. This made the 5 elders furious, but they were unable to catch him. As the sailors bustled about the Saboadi archipelago, loading the final provisions onto a grand sailing ship, Gates kept a watchful eye on the proceedings. However, his gaze couldn't help but wander toward a particular scene not far away. There stood Rhodes, his arms crossed and his eyes distant, lost in deep thoughts. At his side, stood a young girl no older than 11 or 12, her petite frame standing tall and determined. The sea breeze played with her delicate features, tinging them with a rosy hue, her body trembled, yet her resolve was unwavering. For a long time, Rhodes said nothing, his tone tinged with a hint of resignation as he finally spoke, "Do you know how old I am? And yet you want me to be your master." The young girl looked up at him, her gaze unwavering. "Age is but a number," she said in a determined voice, despite her chattering teeth, "all that matters to me is your strength. I must become stronger, as strong as you are. So that I will never feel as helpless as I did on that fateful day." For if it had not been for that tragic day, when she had been shopping in a shop owned by her father's friend, she would have been reduced to ashes along with the ship, like so many others. And her father's tale of survival had only fueled her determination and desire to become stronger. Rhodes couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that settled in his chest as he looked at the determined young girl before him. The girl in question was the daughter of Gates, Snowy. It appeared that the events of that day had sparked something within her, for she had immediately sought out Rhodes' teaching in the art of swordsmanship, despite his attempts to deter her. Suddenly, Snowy dropped to her knees, her voice resolute as she declared, "I understand that I am not yet worthy of being your disciple, if I can just be your maid, I will do it. So long as you teach me the ways of the sword." Rhodes couldn't help but chuckle, "A maid, you say? Can you wash clothes? Can you cook?" But Snowy was quick to surprise him, her small face alight with pride as she proclaimed, "I can do all of that and more. My mother is the renowned chef of the West Sea, I have been learning these skills since I was a child. From court cuisine to barbecue, I am well versed in dishes from all corners of the world, and I even know how to brew my own wine. I promise you, on our journey back to the West Sea, you shall never be served the same meal twice." She patted her chest confidently, her words carrying a hint of challenge. Rhodes couldn't help but be tempted by her offer, but he knew he had no experience in teaching and could only say, "Get up." The path of cultivation is a grueling one and depends heavily on one's natural talent. But Snowy still knelt on the ground, her expression a mixture of tears and determination. The unspoken message was clear: if her request wasn't granted, she would continue to cry and kneel. Rhodes had initially intended to reject her outright, but something in the pit of his stomach, that insatiable hunger for new food, stirred. And before he knew it, the words slipped out of his mouth, "Fine. I'll teach you a bit during our journey, but forget about becoming my disciple. I haven't even figured out my own path yet." Snowy's face lit up with joy and she bounded to her feet, practically skipping with glee. For a moment, she looked like the innocent child she truly was. Shaking his head, Rhodes shrugged. The journey was dull and he figured it wouldn't hurt to spend some time mentoring her. It might even help him to clarify and solidify his own understanding of what he had learned. As the saying goes, reviewing the old to understand the new. Just as this thought crossed his mind, a group of people came into view, approaching them from a distance. Leading the pack was a blond man, astride a white horse, a rose between his lips. His flamboyant air was almost unbearable, making Rhodes want to chop him with a sword. Chapter 91. Take this next strike. Cavendish felt a deep sense of disappointment. He had believed that with his status as a supernova, boasting a staggering bounty of 280 million, he would undoubtedly become the most popular figure of the year, drawing the attention of the entire world upon his arrival at Sabaody Archipelago. Yet, to his dismay, he found himself upstaged by a mere brat. Enraged by this realization, Cavendish resolved to teach the young upstart a lesson. As for his defeat of Diamante, in the eyes of a supernova, the four emperors were nothing more than mere stepping stones to be crushed beneath their feet. How strong could a mere 17-year-old be in comparison? In any case, he knew he was stronger. In the original story, Cavendish harbors a deep hatred for Luffy and his crew, as they had taken the spotlight from him as a supernova. He is an outcast among pirates, obsessed over the attention of others and willing to do whatever it takes to gain their attention. Surrounded by a throng of admiring female fans, Cavendish rode on his white steed, slowly approaching Rhodes with an air of superiority. He looked down upon the young man with a taunting grin and sneered, "You must be Rhodes. You don't seem like much." Rhodes's eyes narrowed in recognition, quickly understanding Cavendish's true intentions. A hint of sarcasm danced across his features as he replied, "Cavendish, I presume." "Indeed, it is I, the young master," Cavendish declared haughtily, striking a pose with an air of arrogance. But Rhodes's expression quickly turned cold and indifferent, as he prepared for the impending confrontation. "Get lost!" Rhodes bellowed, as a fierce and powerful aura erupted from him, accompanied by the sound of thunderous explosions. The void itself seemed to crack open with the deafening roar of his presence. Aura is something that usually accumulates with more and stronger defeated existences, personal strength and experience. When a person reaches the peak state, they can use their aura to make the weak retreat, even if they can't stun the whole audience like a tyrant. With Rhodes' aura, just a few days ago when he publicly defeated Diamante in front of everyone, it would have only made Cavendish feel surprised, but it caused a serious scare to his white horse, Ferrule, under his hip. Ferrule reared up on its hind legs, almost instantly standing up, scaring the people around him to scream, and they retreated one after another. Cavendish desperately tried to calm the horse down, but it was of no use. He had to helplessly dismount and let his subordinates lead Ferrule away from this place. At this time, those female fans who were still in shock returned to their senses and couldn't help but turn their heads to look at Rhodes. At this glance, they were shocked. "Wow, so cool!" The youthful and beautiful girls almost instantly fell for him. Cavendish is blonde and handsome, elegant and handsome, like a Western noble young man. But Rhodes, with his striking appearance and superior aura, surpassed Cavendish in every way. His clothes were windless, and he had a kind of extraordinary and aloof charm that left everyone in awe. At first, they didn't notice it, but once they did, they found it more and more pleasing to the eye. The more they looked, the more they found him increasingly captivating. Each glance left them with a weird feeling in their body. "Wow, this guy is incredibly handsome. Are you single? How about you take me instead, loverboy? This is my hotel room number, let's talk about our training session tonight." The girls' eyes were filled with desire, and without hesitation, they began to flock toward him. Snowy was pushed aside by the wild crowd, her body trembling with fear. Rhodes couldn't help but narrow his eyes, exuding a powerful and intimidating presence, but to the women, it only made him more alluring, causing them to close in even more. "Please." Rhodes's eyebrows furrowed in frustration as he released a faint thunderbolt arc, scattering the women instantly and precisely striking the bodies of those who had lost their minds. Zzz. These thunderbolts were not particularly powerful, not even close to Rhodes's current level of cultivation, but they were enough to halt the advance of these women. They came to a sudden stop, standing in place, their bodies trembling slightly, their eyes blank, feeling a numbness spread throughout their bodies, and then they let out a collective moan of ecstasy. Ah! The scene before them was truly breathtaking, drawing the attention of nearly every person in the port as they stared in confusion at Rhodes. Even Snowy's gaze was filled with a hint of disbelief. Rhodes couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as he realized the extent of the power of the thunder. Meanwhile, Cavendish was left speechless. As he came to his senses, his eyes turned furiously red and he gritted his teeth in anger. Cavendish, who was already insecure, would naturally harbor a deep resentment towards anyone who stole the spotlight from him. And Rhodes' actions were almost like a public display of NTR, causing his anger to boil over. "I challenge you, in the name of the Holy Sword Durndal. You must be defeated by me, only then will I be the most popular man on this island." His words were spoken with a venomous rage as if Rhodes had taken something precious from him. Rhodes, confused by the sudden turn of events, looked at Cavendish with a serious expression and asked, "Are you sure you want to die? I don't think you have it in you." Cavendish was consumed by his fury. "Then I shall fulfill your desire." Rhodes slowly gripped the sword handle, his body lowering in preparation. The once lazy posture was replaced by an aura of deadly intent, emanating a shocking sharpness. The manifestation of the will of a powerful swordsman was enough to make Cavendish's body shiver with fear. In a moment of almost divine clarity, he understood one thing with certainty. He was not a match for this man. Under the exhilaration of life and death, Cavendish's second personality suddenly awakened, his demeanor shifting to one of cold and frenzied madness. In this state, his sword-fighting abilities would be nearly doubled. Those around him could feel the hair-raising killing intent emanating from him, causing fear and dread. In an instant, the once sunny and handsome blonde had transformed into a senseless killer, devoid of any human rationality. And in that same instant, he lost countless female admirers. The girls all showed expressions of fear and retreated, as they felt that Cavendish's killing intent, directed at anyone and anything, was unstoppable. As he watched this scene unfold, Rhodes' expression remained eerily calm, as if he was prepared for what was to come. Buzz. Even though Rhodes didn't exert any force, the sword hilt kept buzzing and vibrating, as if there was a power within the scabbard urging Rhodes to draw it. If you take this next strike, I'll spare your life. Almost as soon as the words left his lips, Rhodes suddenly moved. Swoosh! Under the specially crafted thunder element within the scabbard, Rhodes' sword drawing speed reached its pinnacle, it would even leave Raiji from before in awe. Whoosh! A whistle-like sound echoed through the air as sword energy, lighter than before, shot out from the blade of Aranakiri. The sword energy left behind a shocking white wave, breaking the sound barrier and creating a sound burst cloud. Chapter 92. One strike, one kill. In an instant, the sword chi that exceeded the speed of sound closed the gap of dozens of meters. The onlookers were left in shock, unable to react. No. Cavendish, a supernova of extraordinary talent, the strongest genius born in the great voyage in a year, would not go down easily. When pushed to the brink of life and death, such a character can unleash hidden potential, displaying a power beyond normal means. With a swift movement, he angled his sword to intercept the sword chi before him. But it was not enough, no further action could be taken. In the next moment, a hazy, dream-like sword chi, accompanied by a deafening sound, cleaved Durandal's sword in two. Poof! Cavendish was showered in a spray of blood. Under the sword chi that exceeded the speed of sound, his sword was struck and split in the opposite direction, forming an X-shaped scar on his face. At the same moment, he was thrown back, tracing a perfect arc in mid-air before crashing into a small building. The building collapsed, and smoke filled the air. This supernova, who had landed on Sabayati archipelago with a reward of 280 million, was no more, felled by Rhodes' sword. This was a supernova with a reward of almost 3 billion. Though he hadn't been tempered by the New World, he was not to be underestimated. He had defeated the Marines multiple times and successfully evaded their chase. But now, he was slain in one swift strike by Rhodes. Unbelievable! Is this the young swordsman who killed Diamante? He lives up to his reputation as a renowned figure in the sea. Everyone exchanged glances, all with expressions of awe and admiration as if gazing upon a deity, at the white-clad young man holding a sword. Rumors are one thing, but witnessing it firsthand is even more astounding. Incredible! Snowy clasped her hands together, displaying a look of awe and excitement. Too cool! Cavendish's fans almost instantly switched sides, gazing at Rhodes with flushed faces and hearts filled with admiration. A man of great strength, paired with exceptional charm and an unprecedentedly handsome appearance, was impossible to resist. Not bad, the effect is good. Rhodes' face was devoid of expression, but he was quite pleased in his heart. Ever since he saw Raiji's amazing sword-drawing technique, he had been thinking about creating one for himself. But he hadn't had a good idea until now. A few days ago, he acquired the Aranakiri sword, which perfectly complements his power of thunder. This gave birth to the idea of this drawing sword technique. By harnessing thunder, he creates an electromagnetic environment within his sword scabbard, allowing for a draw at an unimaginable speed. However, Rhodes' drawing technique is difficult, and even time-consuming, unable to achieve the instantaneous results he desired. This is the biggest drawback of this sword technique. Still, it's no major issue since it's a drawing technique. The speed is incredibly fast, even surpassing the speed of sound. A sudden strike may catch the enemy off guard, but the power is not as great as a normal strike. I wonder if Cavendish is still alive. Rhodes quickly analyzed the situation. Even if he was alive, Rhodes never pay attention to the enemies he has defeated. He casually swung his sword, and then the blade slid into the scabbard with a loud noise. At that moment, a sharp, blue glowing black bullet came shooting out of nowhere, from hundreds of meters away. There was no sound, as the speed of the bullet surpassed the speed of sound. So it was a sniper after all. Faced with this bullet, which was capable of killing Cavendish in an instant, Rhodes' expression remained calm, as if he had expected it, slightly shifting his position to avoid it. The bullet detonated upon impact, releasing a fiery heat and a wisp of blue smoke that swiftly corroded the earth within a few meters, emitting a sizzling sound. It was apparent that it harbored a highly toxic substance. Rhodes' gaze quickly shifted to the figure in black, who was making a hasty retreat in the distance, a killer who missed his mark and fled far away. A hitman from the underground. Rod mused, as he watched the hitman retreat quickly and leap over a 3-meter-high wall before disappearing. He furrowed his brow slightly. He picked up Snowy, and flashed beside Gates, placing her down. "Wait for me here, I'll be back soon," Rhodes said casually. Without waiting for Gates' reaction, he stepped out. In a few breaths, he had appeared under the wall and then disappeared. "A hitman." Gates, with his experience, recognized it and couldn't help but show a worried expression. Now, he and Rhodes were like shipmates, and if Rhodes had an accident, he feared that he would soon be torn apart by the surging hungry wolves, who are used to please the Donquixote family. "Brother Rhodes, please stay safe," little Snowy whispered in prayer. Although she was young, she knew that hitmen were very dangerous. And now, Rhodes was chasing the hitman through dozens of streets. The hitman was extremely fast, moving swiftly and in a flexible way, like a grasshopper. The assassin finally came to a stop after running non-stop from Island 23 to Island 47, covering half of the Saboati archipelago island group. He was out of breath, hands grasping his knees. This extreme speed of escape had taken a toll on his stamina. "You're not running anymore." A relaxed voice caught him off guard from behind. The assassin turned around and saw Rhodes standing there, arms crossed, with a calm expression as if he had just returned from a stroll. This distance may have required the assassin to run at full speed, but for Rhodes, it was a breeze. "I didn't expect you to be so strong. No wonder the Donquixote family set such a high reward." The middle-aged man with a hooked nose and sinister aura spoke in a hoarse voice. "Donquixote? Was it Doflamingo who sent you?" Rhodes slightly furrowed his brows. The retaliation from Donquixote had come so quickly, it had only been 3 days. "It doesn't matter if I tell you or not." The assassin sneered. 2 hours ago, the Donquixote family issued a hit on you in the underground world, with a reward of 1 billion belly for your head. I just happened to be in Saboati, that's why I was the first to move, but there will be a steady stream of assassins to come, even including a top-notch assassin, known as the Night Blade, who has accepted the mission. He had once assassinated a major general of the Marine headquarters. Unless you kill them all, they will never give up. 1 billion belly. Rhodes gave a slight pause. Doflamingo really held him in high regard, releasing a 1 billion bounty for his head. This price is almost equivalent to the bounty of one of the 4 emperors or one of the 3 disasters. No wonder the assassin clearly felt the gap in strength, yet still dared to try. While Rhodes was thinking, the assassin suddenly pulled out a huge black shotgun from behind. Bang! This gunshot was like a bomb exploding. The assassin's weapon was obviously specially modified, with tremendous power, and could be called black technology. He was confident that this shot could take down a Marine's captain. Even if Rhodes was powerful, he would inevitably be seriously injured. Chapter 93. Next target, a Shishibuyoki's head? Regrettably, the overwhelming power of the Kanbunshoku of Rhodes had already given away every move of his, so he simply tilted his head slightly and easily evaded the surprise attack. The roar of the massive bullet as it flew past his ear brought with it a strong gust of wind, ruffling his hair gracefully. "A billion belly reward, it seems this journey won't be lacking in excitement," Rhodes murmured with a hint of a smirk on his face. Are you a devil?" The assassin stuttered, his mind reeling with shock. Rhodes shrugged nonchalantly. "For you, I might as well be." He didn't bother to unsheath his sword, instead, he raised his left hand, and in an instant, electric arcs overflowed from his palm, forming a lightning spear that blazed with a dazzling light. Boom! With a swift throw, the spear sliced through the sky, outshining the sun itself. The assassin, who had been trying to flee, was caught up in a blink of an eye. Pop! In the blink of an eye, the lightning spear pierced through the assassin's body, detonating and rending him apart instantly. His body was reduced to pieces, bones and flesh flying everywhere, filling the air with a nauseating smell of burnt flesh. Rhodes shook his head. "Death is too cruel, but you're to blame for coming after me," he said before turning and walking away. Not long after he left, dozens of figures appeared in the area, all of them exuding a cold and ominous aura. Clearly, they were from the underground world. They surveyed the ground littered with fragments of flesh and bones, and couldn't help but gasp after not finding a single intact piece of that guy. "This is too fierce. His body was torn to shreds. This is what a devil must be like." These assassins were all drenched in cold sweat, shivering with fear as they looked at each other. They could see deep fear and awe in each other's eyes. What makes a powerful being the most terrifying? Of course, is the use of such merciless methods. As Rhodes returned to the port, Gates had already made all the necessary preparations. As soon as Rhodes stepped on board, the ship set sail and left the Saboati archipelago. At that moment, many people still stood at the port, staring at the ship as it gradually sailed away, and couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation and excitement. The sea is about to change greatly. This thought crossed everyone's mind almost simultaneously. In Baltigo, Koala had been working with the information chief, Giltio, and was currently sorting through recent sea information in the headquarters castle conference room. Koala, being naturally sharp, excels in information work and finds it intriguing. A few days ago, she received the information that Rhodes had killed Diamante in the Saboati archipelago. This feeling of almost real-time tracking of Rhodes made her feel as if she was also on an adventure alongside Rhodes, witnessing the thrill of it all. As she was looking through reports, she suddenly paused, standing up in shock. Report, there's a billion belly reward being offered in the underground world. What? Giltio, standing beside her, was taken aback and quickly snatched the report to read it, his expression suddenly becoming strange. Koala, seeing his expression, was also confused as to what this attitude meant. A billion belly. Though rewards in the dark world may not hold the same credibility as those of the world government, they still hold significant weight. A billion belly is the equivalent of hitting the jackpot during a drought. Take a look. Koala took the report and her eyes widened, almost tearing the paper in her hand, her face full of shock. Has the Donquixote family gone mad, offering a billion belly reward for Rhodes' head? She had been too focused on the billion belly to pay attention to the specifics of the reward. As Koala continued to read, she finally understood and couldn't help but let out a wry smile. It turns out Doflamingo was forced back by Vice Admiral Jun. He can't move personally, so he had to rely on the underground world. A billion belly, this is the highest reward. I'm afraid the entire underground world is in an uproar. Yet, even the top assassin, Nightblade, has accepted the mission. The Revolutionary Army often does underground activities and is very familiar with all aspects of this dark world. The assassin known as Nightblade was recorded in the files, with a reputation for possessing a unique and peculiar fruit ability that was perfectly suited for his line of work as an assassin. In reality, it was almost a given that top-level assassins possessed special devil fruit abilities that were fatal to their victims. These powerful figures were the ones that even high-ranking officers of the Revolutionary Army were careful and cautious around, avoiding them at all costs. But Giltio simply wore a smile on his face. This is what true training is like. Koala forced a smile, her expression showing some concern. I must inform Rhodes of this information. She made a decision in her mind. She would definitely contact him after work. On the vast blue ocean, a grand sailing ship cut through the waves. After setting sail, Gates and the others relaxed, for it was difficult to locate and capture a ship on the open sea. But Gates, being cautious, still used his own magnetic compass to design a more obscure route. Rhodes didn't care, only asking Gates to make the final stop of their journey to Alabasta. This was a place that he had decided to visit during his training journey from the start. Since he was on the verge of completing the second level of the knowledge book, he had already guessed the next advancement requirements. Rhodes had come to realize that the advancement of the levels was not just about climbing the ranks, but more about the impact he had on the world. And the influence wielded by the Shishibukai was certainly significant enough to warrant an advancement from a second level to the third level. Though many elite figures may have dismissed the Shishibukai as a joke, they commanded great respect among the common people. They were one of the three major powers that stood tall with the Marine headquarters and the Yonko, wielding influence that spanned the entire world. The current Shishibukai are the world's greatest swordsman, Hawkeye My Hawk. The tyrant, Bartholomew Kuma. The Shishibukai, Donquixote Doflamingo. The pirate empress, Boa Hancock. The pirate hunter, Jimbei. The desert king, Sir Crocodile. The Gorgon, Gecko Moria. For Rhodes to become one of the Shishibukai, he would have to replace one of the current members. But the options available to him were limited. It was not just a matter of strength, but also of reasonableness. The Shishibukai system was established by the world government. They were considered to be external members of the world government. As long as they had not committed the crime of treason, they enjoyed the legal right to plunder, and the world government and the Marines have the responsibility to protect them. Crocodile, it pains me to say it, but your weakness and overestimation of your own abilities in scheming for the country, Arabasta, has brought you to my doorstep. Rhodes stood tall on the deck, his gaze fixed upon the vast expanse of the sea as he pondered. On the other hand, little Snowy was fully focused and determined to master the art of swordsmanship, honing her basic techniques with fervor. Despite her hard work and dedication, Snowy's innate talent for swordsmanship was average at best. Even with Rhodes' guidance and teachings, her progress was slow. After over a month of intense practice, Snowy's swordsmanship had seen only minimal improvement. However, her culinary skills had reached new heights. Her knife skills had become razor sharp, she was more proficient in handling ingredients and the food she cooked had become mouth-watering, much to Rhodes' delight. But Snowy could only feel a sense of despair. Chapter 94. Seeking Fame, Rumors of a Dragon. The sound of electricity crackled in the air as a bolt of lightning pulsed and shifted within Rhodes' open palm. At times, it was graceful, swirling and dancing like a bird in flight. At other moments, it was fierce, taking on the form of a wild animal, running and roaring with ferocity. And then, just as suddenly, it transformed into a towering tree, its branches reaching skyward in a display of lush greenery. Each movement, each detail, was so lifelike that sailors passing by couldn't help but stare in amazement. Control is becoming easier, Rhodes murmured, his blue eyes shining with satisfaction. As he mastered the power of lightning, the previously unruly energy seemed to calm, becoming pliant and obedient to his will. He no longer needed to rely on sword techniques to shape and control the lightning. He could easily mold and unleash devastating and deadly attacks, much like the lightning spear that had felled the black-clad assassin. Now, even with just the power of lightning alone, Rhodes' power was on par with that of a famous pirates, and he was far from the weakest among his peers. Of course, while the power of lightning was incredibly destructive, it lacked the precision and sharpness of sword techniques. Simple electric shocks, no matter how powerful, would not be enough to take down the formidable monsters that roamed this world. Their resistance was too great. Take the strongest creature, the king of beasts, Kaido, for example. Even a direct hit from a bolt of heavenly thunder would likely only result in temporary paralysis or a mild ache. As Rhodes pondered this, Snowy completed her training for the day, collapsing onto the ground with a heavy breath and sweat pouring down her face. It took a moment for her to catch her breath, then she looked at Rhodes with a hint of disappointment. Brother Rhodes, is it because my talent is lacking that I haven't made any progress despite training for so long? The young girl was dejected, and her spirit dampened. Your talent is not bad, Rhodes said, trying to reassure her. Hearing these words from someone as powerful as Rhodes, gave Snow a glimmer of hope, that she might have a chance to become a formidable warrior. However, Rhodes' next words crushed that hope. But it seems to have all gone into your cooking. He said this with a nod of approval. Snowy was truly the daughter of the first chef of the West Sea, her culinary skills were extraordinary, and her range was quite broad. Even with limited ingredients on the ship, she managed to come up with new dishes every day. Well, at least I'm good at something. Snowy turned away, pouting. Come here, Rhodes said, smiling. No way. Snowy covered her ears, making a cute expression as if to say, I'd rather die. Or jump off the ship. I won't come. I can help you become stronger quickly, Rhodes offered. What? Snowy exclaimed. She practically jumped 3 feet high, ran over to Rhodes, and looked at him pitifully. Didn't you say you weren't coming? Rhodes looked at her with a half-amused expression, and Snowy lowered her head in embarrassment, fidgeting with her hands. Turn around and sit down, Rhodes said with a steady voice, not wanting to upset the young girl. Snowy obediently followed his instructions and sat down. Rhodes also sat down and with a slow and steady movement, he extended a slender finger and placed it on Snowy's delicate neck. He could feel the smoothness of her skin, like cream, and his expression remained calm as he carefully released a faint stream of lightning power. He planned to use the power of lightning to aid in Snowy's body tempering, as this initial stage would be the most crucial in laying a strong foundation for her future training. A subtle numbness spread throughout Snowy's body, and she almost instantly lost control of her physical form. As the power flowed through her, Rhodes could see the condition of her body clearly. It's far too fragile, Rhodes thought to himself, a hint of disappointment in his mind. It seemed that even a slight movement on his part could destroy her tender, delicate body. The tempering process began. Rhodes had vast experience and mastery over lightning, and the danger was minimal. However, the process would not be easy, for Snowy's body was still too young and weak. If it hurts, speak up, and I'll make it weaker, Rhodes said in a calm voice. Snowy's brows furrowed, Her small face contorted in pain, yet she stubbornly remained silent, gritting her teeth and pushing through the discomfort. As Rhodes let go of her, Snowy fell to the ground, her eyes staring blankly at the sky. Her small frame shook as she lay there, her fair skin flushed with a faint red hue and sweat covering her body. The training had been incredibly effective. Snowy's physical abilities had undergone a comprehensive enhancement after a day of adjustment and recovery. Her strength, speed, and even her height had increased. This revelation left Gates and the others shocked, and they exclaimed in awe, their gazes towards Rhodes completely transformed. Not only was Rod powerful, but he also possessed the ability to enhance others. Such a powerful being, if he were to establish his own power, could easily claim a place in the world and attract strong individuals from all corners of the globe. A few more days passed. "Lord Rhodes, our next stop is the island of monsters and roast meat," said Gates, his voice tinged with exhaustion. He had vastly underestimated the tracking and hunting capabilities of the powerful agent of the underworld. Their landings for supplies had been ambushed and resulted in the loss of many sailors. If not for Rhodes' immense strength and his ability to take down the assassins attempting to destroy their ship, they would have been in dire straits. "This is the penultimate stop, next one is Arabistan," Gates said with a hint of relief. "This island should be relatively safe, it is on the edge of the windless belt and occasionally sea kings wander, but it's dangerous, they definitely wouldn't have guessed that we would choose to land here." Rhodes didn't seem too bothered by the possibility of encountering unknown creatures. After all, if he did, he would simply kill them. His greater concern was that his reputation may not be strong enough. Being a member of the Seven Warlords required not only strength but also a sufficient level of reputation that can intimidate the average pirate. In this world where the strong are respected, reputation is determined by the opponents one has defeated. "Fantastic! I've heard my mother speak of monsters and roast meat island. The meat of the monsters here is unique and tastes particularly delicious when grilled," Snow exclaimed excitedly. "I've wanted to come here for ages, but unfortunately, our last route didn't pass through." "Is that so?" Rhodes was intrigued by the mention of the roast meat. If it was something that even the top chef of the West Sea couldn't forget, it must be truly delicious. If places like this were known by Luffy, he would definitely come here, the three of them mused as they spotted a dark silhouette looming in the distance. It was a medium-sized island, with a vast expanse of undulating terrain that seemed to stretch on endlessly, like a primeval jungle. The ports of mankind were nothing but a small fraction of the icy landscape. Gates gazed out at the distant islands and ports, his voice filled with longing as he spoke. "These islands aren't on the usual shipping routes. They were created by humans. Someone saw a dragon on this island, and ever since, people come here every year to challenge themselves, to gain the title of a dragon-slaying warrior. But in reality, they can hardly defeat the monsters that lurk on the outskirts." He spoke with a sense of nostalgia, and a hint of disappointment. The fur of the beasts on this island was of the highest quality and highly sought after by the nobles of the West Sea. He had made a considerable fortune from it in the past. "A dragon!" Rhodes exclaimed, his eyes widening in surprise. The pirate world did indeed have dragons. Kaido, the king of beasts, was probably one of them, a dragon fruit user of the Zoan type. The legendary samurai, Ryama, the sword god, had once, with one swift strike, felled a flying dragon and earned the title of Dragon Slayer, becoming famous throughout the land. "I wonder how strong this dragon is," Rhodes mused. "If it's not that strong, then perhaps I'll give the Dragon Slayer title a try." The fame of becoming a Dragon Slayer would be more than enough to meet the reputation requirements of becoming a Shishibukai. Chapter 95. Surprising Encounter. The Island of Monsters and Roast Meat, a towering structure perched near the port. This was one of Baroque Works' offices. Did this man begin training from birth? He's only 2 years older than me, yet he's already leaving a mark on the seas and causing a stir in the entire underworld. As Princess Vivi gazed upon that charming face on the wanted poster, her mind couldn't help but wonder. If she possessed such power, the plight of Alabasta would be easily solved without the need for undercover work, a tedious and uncertain endeavor. If only I could ask for his help. It was an unavoidable thought that crossed her mind, but Vivi quickly shook her head. Even if she could convince Rhodes to aid her, making contact with him would be a monumental task. The sea is vast and the odds of crossing paths with the person one desires are slim. Ah! With a soft sigh, Vivi placed the wanted poster down and turned her gaze towards the nearby port. And then it happened. A gasp escaped her lips as she quickly grabbed the binoculars, her eyes scanning the scene with eagerness. And what she saw left her in shock. That man, he actually chose to dock here for supplies. Indeed, this island is remote enough that many are unaware of its existence. Happiness had come unexpectedly and Vivi could hardly comprehend her current emotions. But as quickly as it came, her excitement dissipated. She was but a powerless and insignificant princess, why would anyone offer their aid? Reality is not a fairy tale, and simply revealing her princess identity will not guarantee that others will willingly and selflessly help her without any expectations of reward. I'll give it a try. Vivi clenched her fist, her determination unwavering. For the sake of her country, she was willing to give it all. At the port. There's no assassin around. Rhodes said calmly to Gates and the others. The hostility of a typical assassin is almost impossible to detect through sight, smell, and touch, and even if they are well hidden, their malice can still be sensed by Rhodes and thus be discovered. Unless they are of the highest caliber, like that guy Koala mentioned, it is possible for him to completely conceal his hostility in front of Rhodes. Hearing this, Gates and the others let out a sigh of relief. We can finally relax. I'm going to take a hot shower and let off some steam. I want to buy some things to take back to the West Sea and try the local roast meat. The sailors excitedly whispered among themselves and, with Gates' permission, they left in groups. Gates went to the town center to purchase fresh water, food, and other necessary supplies, while also procuring a batch of high-quality furs. Rhodes' big brother, come quickly, I know where to find the most famous barbecue place here. Snowy walked ahead, her pure white dress fluttering with her light steps, creating a dazzling and beautiful sight. Rhodes sauntered behind, taking in his surroundings with a carefree attitude. This island was certainly different from the ones he had visited before. Fewer people came and went, but each one exuded a formidable presence, with towering builds and a menacing aura. It was clear that they were not weak in strength. Just then, a clear and melodic voice, light and graceful, echoed from beside him. Sir, is this your first time here? Do you need a tour guide? I charge only 2,000 belly. The voice was familiar, Rhodes followed it with curiosity, and was momentarily taken aback. The person he saw was a very familiar figure. With aquamarine hair cascading down her waist, a delicate appearance, and ordinary clothes that couldn't conceal the noble air that seemed to originate from her very bloodline. Princess Vivi of the ancient kingdom of Alabasta. Rhodes never would have thought that he would chance upon her here. But thinking about it, it made sense. This place was close to Alabasta, and it was normal for Baroque works to have operatives stationed here. Sir? Do you need a tour guide? Vivi didn't assume that Rhodes would be surprised by her appearance, but she gently reminded him with a warm tone. Rhodes heard the words and snapped back to attention, his gaze fixed upon the desert princess posing as a tour guide. He had no intention of playing games with her, instead opting for a straightforward approach. Princess Vivi, please come over here, I have something important to discuss with you. As soon as the words left his mouth, the delicate smile on Vivi's face froze in place. What on earth was happening? She knew that her first time as a tour guide would have its shortcomings, but she never expected him to recognize her as a princess. Could it be that this man possessed the ability to read minds? Vivi couldn't help but gape in shock, her eyes wide and her mind filled with question marks. This is not right. This is not a place for idle chatter, come with me. Rhodes' tone was calm, yet there was an undeniable air of authority that made Vivi unconsciously follow him. As they walked, Vivi slowly regained her composure. She gritted her teeth and attempted to clear her thoughts in a trial to uncover Rhodes' intentions, but her mind was in a state of chaos, and she couldn't even remember her own name. It was Rhodes' sudden revelation of her princess identity that left her in such a state of shock. As the Princess of Alabasta, Vivi rarely appeared in public, save for the World Conference, which was also the reason why she was able to infiltrate the Baroque works unnoticed. But she never imagined that this young man, who she had never met before and was only 2 years older, would know her true identity. Just as Vivi was lost in her thoughts, the two arrived at a secluded courtyard. This was a courtyard for a barbecue shop, a space resembling a private room. Snowy stood at the entrance, beckoning to Rhodes with a wave. Rhodes and his companions walked over. Snowy couldn't help but inquire, Rhodes' brother, who is this woman? Vivi, a friend of mine, Rhodes replied. Hello, Vivi managed a forced smile. Normally, the sight of such an adorable girl would bring her joy, but at this moment, her mind was elsewhere. The three entered the courtyard. Little Snowy, ever the sharp one, picked up on the peculiar atmosphere between Rhodes and the young girl, and promptly offered to order the roasted meat. With her departure, the scene grew quiet. Vivi clenched her small fists tightly, her fingers turning white from the force. She was clearly nervous. "Don't be so nervous, I bear no ill will," Rhodes reassured her with a smile. Princess Vivi was an integral part of his plans. To bring down Crocodile and claim a seat among the 7 warlords, it was necessary to reveal to the world government or the Marines the truth of his treacherous intentions. And these pieces of evidence, personally testified by the royal family of Alabasta, are undoubtedly the most convincing. Princess Vivi is the perfect candidate. As Rhodes spoke, Vivi's emotions slowly settled and a look of disbelief and a hint of shyness appeared in her eyes. Even though Rhodes clearly stated his own interests, in the eyes of a 15-year-old girl, it appeared as something else. Journeying thousands of miles, specifically to rescue Alabasta in danger, facing powerful and evil enemies, this is truly a heroic tale of epic proportions. Vivi's face flushed, as she looked at Rhodes, she couldn't help but show a hint of admiration. Could she be the princess of this hero's epic legend? Chapter 96. The Dragon Egg Heist. As the port and jungle met, 2 figures could be seen sprinting towards the port with great haste. Big brother, we've hit the jackpot this time. This is a dragon egg, and if we put it up for auction in Saboati, it'll fetch us a fortune, said the young man, who was carrying a large bundle, in a hushed tone, excitement brimming in his voice. Keep it down, Peppa, we're not out of the woods yet. Let's get on the ship first and talk later, replied, his expression serious. Got it, Peppa replied with a sly grin on his face. A glint of malice flickered in his eyes as he proposed, why don't we take advantage of the situation and take out a few pirate ships? Let them deal with the dragon while we wait. When the black dragon leaves port, we can come back and loot the battlefield for more gains. Was taken aback, looking at Peppa in disbelief. Such ruthlessness! But he couldn't deny the allure of the plan. After all, they were all pirates, and attacking each other and scheming against one another were par for the course. If we don't do this, we'll regret it. If the black dragon causes too much damage, we'll conquer this port completely and capture everyone as slaves, said, determination etched on his face. With such an accomplishment, our bounties will increase by a level, and we'll be able to recruit more men in Saboati. Then we can set off to conquer the new world and become pirate kings. Peppa was in awe. Big brother, you're truly impressive. At that moment, it seemed as though a bright future was within their grasp. Roar! But just as they were reveling in their newfound prospects, a deafening roar echoed from the distance, sending shockwaves throughout the port and startling everyone. People rushed to see what the commotion was about, while and Peppa hastened their steps towards the sea, their expressions a mixture of fear and confusion. In the shadows, a figure in black clothes watched as the 2 men fled. A faint smile crossed their lips as they looked towards Rhodes' direction and whispered in a melancholic tone, "Slay the dragon, for when you do, it will mark your time of death. Only by falling at the pinnacle of glory can one be worthy of a billion-belly bounty." In the barbecue courtyard. After reaching a consensus with Vivi, Rhodes came to the grill and stared hungrily at the golden, tender, and unknown animal roasting on it. A unique aroma wafted in the air, stirring one's innate desire for food. Gulp! Rhodes couldn't help but swallow his saliva, his eyes bulging with hunger. Vivi couldn't help but drool either. As a princess of the kingdom, she had often eaten barbecue from this place. But it was clear that even with the same ingredients, the taste varied greatly in the hands of different cooks. Despite the lack of any elaborate techniques, the Snowy seemed to have a way of bringing out the full flavor of the food. Just as the meal was about to be ready, a fierce and majestic dragon roar echoed through the air. The sound, emanating from the top of the food chain, startled Snowy, causing her to jolt and almost drop the meat in the pot. You stay here, Rhodes said, annoyance creeping into his voice, before leaping onto the roof to survey the distance. In the distance, a massive black dragon could be seen hurtling towards them. Its body was about 20 meters long, resembling a giant fighter jet. Its scales glistened with a cold metallic shine, its 2 dragon horns reached towards the sky, and its claws shone with a dangerous light. Its sharp, red eyes stared down at the human port below. This was unmistakably a western dragon. With a flap of its wings, it created a gust of wind that knocked over the humans in the port. Rhodes could clearly see the highly human-like intelligence shining in the dragon's eyes. Like the super-large sea kings, this black dragon also possessed human-like wisdom. Without warning, the dragon's gaze locked onto a specific direction and it prepared to swoop in for an attack. But as it turns out, there are always humans who overestimate their abilities. As the black dragon emerged, many people's thoughts were consumed by one word: kill. The sound of gunfire echoed through the air as countless cannons were aimed skyward. These portable cannons, similar in appearance to RPGs, were incredibly powerful and could blast houses to pieces. But when aimed at the black dragon, they only made it stumble and left no mark on its scales. "This is a death wish," Rhodes murmured as he watched the black dragon charge down the port, its powerful dragon body a deadly weapon as it smashed through everything in its path like a bulldozer. Houses, buildings, and even the warriors who sought to kill the dragon were all instantly decimated. "It doesn't seem too strong, its breath seems a bit weak," Rhodes observed, but he was in no rush to act. Western dragons are still dragons, and in any world, they represent ultimate power and majesty, not to be underestimated. Suddenly, Rhodes' gaze became focused and his eyes changed color as he picked up a peculiar scent similar to the black dragon from a distance. He then saw two figures emerging from a nearby alley. One of them was carrying a bundle, which was the source of the scent. A young dragon or a dragon egg? "It's definitely a dragon egg," Rhodes deduced swiftly. A dragon egg, if it hatches and is nurtured properly, would make for an incredible battle companion. Becoming a legendary dragon knight is the epitome of coolness. But he had no idea what it would taste like. Rhodes stroked his chin. He had consumed eggs from chickens, ducks, geese, and ostriches, but never a dragon egg. I have to give it a try." Whoosh! In a blink of an eye, a streak of light zipped past. Peppa, who was running, suddenly felt a tap on his back, and the bundle carrying the dragon egg flew out of his grasp. "Who is it?" Peppa halted abruptly and looked behind him. He saw a young man in white, who was examining the dragon egg in his hand, about half a meter in size, occasionally patting his lips as if contemplating how to relish it. "Damn it! That's my egg!" Peppa bellowed in fury as he stormed forward, his large sword raised high, creating a deafening whistle as he swung it with all his might. Stealing a dragon egg from a dragon's nest required not only luck but also a well-laid plan, but it was clear that these two men were not your average individuals in terms of strength. Seeing Peppa's actions, Dur had no choice but to draw his own sword and join the battle. They were just two teenagers, how strong could they possibly be? "Ants," Rhodes sneered, as he nonchalantly waved his hand, summoning two silver snakes made of lightning force to surge forward. Dur and Peppa didn't even have a chance to react before they were bisected by the snakes. Electricity crackled and sparks flew, thunder roared as they fell to the ground, their bodies exuding the smell of burning flesh. These enemies were not even worthy of Rhodes unsheathing his sword. Chapter 97. The Dragon's Egg, a tempting taste of danger. As Rhodes walked into the courtyard with a dragon egg in hand, Vivi and Snowy couldn't help but stare in shock. "A dragon egg?" Vivi stammered, her expression filled with awe. Though she had her own mount, it was nothing compared to the legendary dragon. Snowy's eyes widened in surprise. She couldn't help but think of the potential power that could be harnessed if this creature was raised and trained. It could possibly rule over an entire nation. But before they could even process their thoughts, Rhodes casually placed the dragon egg on the grill and added some firewood to the flames. He seemed to be planning to eat Vivi. Snowy. Vivi and Snowy were speechless. "That's such a waste!" Vivi exclaimed, her eyes still fixated on the egg. "This is a dragon egg. Who in the world has ever eaten one?" Throughout history, there have been very few people who have seen dragons, let alone tasted dragon eggs. This scene, it was simply unimaginable. Snowy was even more excited. Without Rhodes' invitation, the little thing quickly moved. The dragon egg was very big and not easy to roast, but as a culinary prodigy, Snowy had dealt with large eggs before and she quickly got the necessary tools. Stewing the dragon egg. One dragon egg probably won't be enough to eat, I'll have to go hunting for a dragon." As soon as he finished speaking, Rhodes took flight, leaping into the air with a fierce determination. He soared through the sky, his destination the distant battlefield. "Wait!" Vivi's expression changed, she didn't have time to persuade him. She kicked the ground in frustration, her heart heavy with worry. He was too impulsive. Even though he was a renowned young warrior of the sea, it was reckless for him to face a dragon alone. She had been on this island for a few months now. The most common rumor she had heard was about the dragons on the island. The black dragon had a body covered in scales, impenetrable, and even a bomb would only leave a white mark on its armor. Its claws were razor sharp and could easily tear through steel. It was extremely fast and agile, and had the advantage in the air. There were also rumors that it could breathe fire, melting everything in its path. This was not a creature that a human could fight against. Vivi's face was etched with worry. The hero had just arrived and was about to be taken away by the dragon. What was she, the princess, supposed to do? At this moment, Rhodes had already using Jeppo, approaching the battlefield. The battlefield was in chaos, with people everywhere in a state of excitement, fear, and some even trembling. They used the buildings as cover and continued to attack, with swords, guns, and even steel nets, but they were easily torn apart by the dragon's claws. With a deafening roar, the black dragon's rage reached its peak. It lifted its head high and let out an ear-piercing dragon's roar that sent visible shockwaves rippling through the air, sweeping in all directions. The dragon slayers who were about to strike were sent flying, their eardrums burst, leaving trails of fresh blood streaming from their ears. Most of them were now permanently deaf. In the next moment, the black dragon opened its jaws wide and breathed out a scorching hot breath that twisted and distorted the air around it. The dragon's breath melted an entire house in an instant, turning the ground into molten lava. Those who were hiding behind it were reduced to ashes in the blink of an eye. Wherever the dragon's breath passed, nothing survived. The earth was left barren and desolate. It carved out 100-meter-long passage in the harbor, with steam rising, lava flowing, and a terrifying sight to behold. Everyone was left speechless, their excitement and passion instantly doused with a bucket of cold reality. It was too terrifying to fathom. After the initial shock dissipated, they realized a grim truth. Killing dragons may be glorious, but it was something simply not worth dying for. In front of this legendary creature, they were nothing more than insignificant ants, unable to make a single dent on its formidable presence. The faces of the pirate captains with bounties of 70 to 80 million, as well as the leaders of this port, twisted with dread. Just moments ago, that dragon breath had effortlessly slain the strongest among them. "We can't win this, let's retreat," the leader said with a bitter shake of his head. The difference in strength was too great. Their full-force attacks could only leave a faint trace of blood on the black dragon's body. Compared to its massive body, it was not even worth scratching. But the black dragon's attacks easily decimated them. This kind of creature, it seems only the powerful pirate crews of the New World could handle it, one of the pirate captains said with a sigh. Even heavy artillery can barely break through the dragon's scales. This is not a problem that can be solved by numbers. The entire port would have to sacrifice themselves, but it still wouldn't be enough to kill this black dragon, another added. Just as they were speaking, someone shouted, "Quick, look, someone is walking in the sky." "What?" Everyone was shocked and turned to look, then revealed a look of surprise. Jeppo. Could it be a powerful Marines officer? To stop this black dragon, it would at least have to be one of the top few from the Marines' admiral rank, someone said with a hint of awe. As the crew carefully examined the image, they couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity, though they couldn't quite place where they had seen it before. The newspaper article was not a wanted poster, and the quality of the image was not as clear as that of a wanted poster, so they were unable to immediately recognize Rhodes. However, as soon as Rhodes unsheathed his sword, his body was bathed in a dazzling, sun-like aura of thunderbolts. "It's him!" The crew exclaimed in shock, their expressions filled with excitement. Suddenly, an incredible thought crossed their minds. Could they be witnessing the birth of the second dragon slayer? "Impossible," said the harbour master, shaking his head. "This dragon is incredibly resilient and can withstand heavy artillery. Even someone like Rhodes Dano at most can only defeat it. And the black dragon can fly, the sky is its playground, this is the biggest advantage, and its movements are not flexible enough is a weakness." The analysis was sound, and the pirate captains all nodded in agreement. As Rhodes approached the black dragon, he looked down at the formidable and strange creature. Compared to the mid-size sea king he had encountered before, this black dragon was much smaller in size, but it was clearly more fierce and dangerous. Its claws and teeth are sharp, its armor tough enough to withstand heavy artillery, and its breath was deadly. It was truly worthy of the name Black Dragon. The creature before them was not something that an ordinary commander could handle, only someone of the caliber of a Doberman or a Nigamo could possibly stand a chance. Even then, the odds of defeating it were uncertain. "Too bad for you, you crossed paths with me," Rhodes said with a shake of his head. He slowly unsheathed his sword, the azure blade glinting under the illumination of the thunder. It hummed to life, the clear sword song resounding through the land, capturing the attention of all in the port. As he did so, his body was enveloped in a surge of thunder that reached 10 meters high, as if a thunder god had descended upon them. The light was so bright that it was difficult to look directly at it, and the aura of majesty it exuded was undeniable. Roar! The black dragon finally realized the gravity of the situation and turned its head to see Rhodes, bathed in thunder, his sword held aloft. It was taken aback, its pupils reflecting a sense of fear, but it did not back down. It breathed out a massive breath, larger than before, that rushed towards Rhodes like a flood. Chapter 98. The Rays of the New Dragon Slayer. The boiling heat boils over, forming a raging torrent that rushes towards the sky, unleashing a scorching breath that engulfs everything in its wake. The ominous heat descends, casting the world in a pale shadow, as the air twists and writhes and buildings spontaneously combust. How will he contend with such a move? All eyes are fixed in horrified awe, as the black dragon unleashes the same attack it had used before, reducing everything to ashes. Even the strongest among them fell in an instant. What chance did Rhodes stand? Dragon's breath. But Rhodes's expression remains composed as he gazes upon the fearsome dragon breath, his eyes aglow with a fierce blue light. The divine dragon that Kaido, the Beast King, had transformed into, could level entire cities with just a single breath of scorching heat. Though this black dragon's breath paled in comparison to Kaido's, it was still a formidable force not to be underestimated. With a steady grip on his sword, Rhodes swung it downward with a sudden flourish. Thunder Dragon! A deafening roar echoed as the power of thunder coalesced, forming rippling blue waves, before erupting forth with Rhodes's sword strike. The deep blue thunder took shape of a colossal and awe-inspiring thunder dragon, with its mane, scales and tail all intricately detailed. It writhed in mid-air for 9 turns before crashing into the black dragon's breath with a deafening boom. The collision of thunder and heat sparked a dazzling display of blue and red light as if two worlds had collided and unleashed a terrifying energy fluctuation. The earth shook with a deafening boom, as the area was engulfed in a shocking roar. Thunder and heat swirled and collided, bursting and scattering, setting the earth ablaze and splitting it apart. Each fissure was at least a foot wide, dense and crisscrossing. The destructive power on display was unimaginable. It's too terrifying. The people in the distant port who had retreated earlier now showed deep expressions of reverence. For these people in the early stages of the Grand Line, this was nothing short of a battle between gods, a power that they could not comprehend. They couldn't even get close to the battlefield. A stray blast of heat or thunder would be enough to end their lives. Under the gaze of all present, the earth-shattering collision ultimately ended with the black dragon's defeat. It was seen stopping its breath of heat, flapping its wings, and taking off, avoiding the thunder dragon's attack that followed closely. With a deafening boom, the remnants of the thunder dragon crash on the ground, instantly creating a large pit with a diameter of over 10 meters, and the surface blackened. The black dragon's eyes showed a highly humanized hint of fear and solemnity, but were still filled with an innate arrogance. After all, it was a dragon, the most dignified creature in the world. With a buzz, the void trembled, and the black dragon moved as fast as lightning, fiercely attacking Rhodes. Its body seemed like a black mountain shooting into the sky. Faced with the black dragon's fierce attack, Rhodes stood unfazed, his sword slicing through the air with precision. Shh! A silver-white blade of energy shot forth, cutting through the sky like a comet, leaving a trail of glistening sharpness that hurtled towards the black dragon. The black dragon's massive body moved with a nimbleness that belied its size, its fleshy wings flapping lightly as it tilted its body, narrowly avoiding the attack and continuing to press on towards Rhodes. Rhodes' expression remained unperturbed, his sword still in hand, as he struck out once more. The black dragon, now close enough to strike, extended its 2 massive, darkly gleaming claws. Ding! The two clashed in mid-air. Rhodes, at a disadvantage due to his smaller size, was sent flying backwards, but he quickly regained his footing with Jeppo. To be able to block my strike, you are quite resilient. You are worthy of being the ultimate material said to be used in creating the ultimate great sword. Rhodes' lips curled into a smile, as he charged once again, this time with more caution, avoiding the dragon claws. On one hand, the dragon claws were incredibly resilient and it would be difficult to inflict significant damage. On the other hand, Rhodes did not want to waste such a rare and precious material, not when it could potentially be used to forge a new, ultimate great sword in the future. With the power of thunder coursing through him, Rhodes moved with lightning speed, darting across the sky like a bird of prey, charging towards the black dragon with determination. As Rhodes gracefully evaded the black dragon's attack in mid-air, he landed on its body with precision. With a powerful strike, he wields his sword, his legs propelling him forward with incredible strength as he climbs up the dragon's body, pummeling and rattling its frame. Normally, the sword's power would be enough to crush the earth beneath, but as it landed on the dragon's scales, it failed to shatter them, instead causing the black dragon to lose its balance and falter. The black dragon sensed the danger as Rhodes inched closer to its head, but it was powerless to stop him. In a desperate attempt, the dragon tried to hit Rhodes with his tail. Whoosh! However, Rhodes anticipated and guarded against the dragon's tail strike, and the black dragon ended up hitting itself, causing it to cough up a mouthful of blood. With an anguished roar, the black dragon felt the world's deep-seated malice towards it. Why does such a small creature possess such immense power? It's suffocating. It's audacious. Its claws can't grab, its teeth can't bite, and its tail landed on itself instead. The black dragon spiraled and flew in mid-air, unable to shake off the ant on its back, emitting suffocated dragon roars that left all onlookers in shock and disbelief. This can't be true. It must not be true. Oh my god, is he a dragon knight? Everyone rubbed their eyes, unable to fathom what they were witnessing. The black dragon let out a final, furious roar before plummeting to the earth, crashing down like a black mountain, unleashing a powerful gust of wind. Boom! The sound of thunder echoed as the shockwave of destruction swept through, leaving nothing but rubble in its wake. Buildings were reduced to ruins, rocks were sent flying, and the scene was nothing short of catastrophic. On the edge of the battlefield, onlookers retreated in fear, while only the bravest captains remained, their eyes fixed on the unfolding events. What is happening? To most, the Black Dragon's desperate counterattack was akin to a massive naval warship exploding. Surely, even the strongest warrior, Rhodes, could not have withstood such a blow. Even if he had survived, he would have been gravely injured. Vivi's nerves were stretched to their breaking point as she watched on, her heart heavy with the thought that the hard-won opportunity for the kingdom may have been for naught. As the wind died down and the dust cleared, an incredible sight emerged from the war-torn landscape. A young man, dressed in white and bathed in the light of thunder, stood tall and proud, with a sword in hand. At his feet, the once invincible black dragon lay still, its head held high and its eyes glinting with a sense of peace, as its life slowly slipped away. The port was eerily silent at that moment. All present stared in disbelief, their eyes reflecting the dreamlike and impossible scene before them. Just moments ago, an army of nearly 10,000 gathered, all for the purpose of appeasing the hunger of a black dragon, nothing more than a one-sided slaughter. But now, this young man in white, armed with nothing more than a sword, slew the black dragon single-handedly. Bathed in the thunder, he cut down the black dragon. From this day forward, Rhodes will be a name known throughout the world. A pirate captain spoke with intensity, his words ringing with conviction. All hearts were heavy. This port was built specifically for the purpose of dragon slaying. For many years, countless brave swordsmen came here, attempting to complete the dragon slaying feat, and become famous throughout the world, but they all ended in defeat, becoming food for the black dragon. After the sword god, Ryama, we're witnessing the birth of the new generation of dragon-slaying swordsmen. The port's administrator spoke with a tone of nostalgia. All present felt as if they were witnessing history. Some swordsmen were incredibly excited to the point that tears welled up in their eyes. In the swordsman world, there are only two titles that are most prominent. One of them is of course the world's strongest swordsman. This title represented the pinnacle of swordsmanship, overlooking all swordsmen of an era. The other was a title only achieved by Ryama, the dragon-slaying swordsman, in history. The world's strongest swordsman has been crowned one after another. The dragon-slaying swordsman, Ryama, is the only one in history. Chapter 99. Trap. Rhodes' situation was not exactly great. The fact that the black dragon was burning the ground to ashes was essentially forcing Rhodes to fight for his life. In that moment of extreme speed, the two entangled with each other, unable to separate. Rhodes may have shattered the black dragon's heart with one sword stroke, killing it, but the dragon's indestructible dragon claws also tore open Rhodes's chest, ripping away a chunk of flesh and blood. If it wasn't for Rhodes's lightning-fast reflexes, maximizing his nerve response, barely creating some distance, that claw would have also crushed Rhodes's heart. What a resolute and proud creature, Rhodes sighed as he looked at the claw marks on his chest. This was the most serious injury he had received since he began training, and the closest he had ever come to death. However, as long as the injuries did not affect his heart or other vital organs, this kind of injury was already unlikely to trouble Rhodes, and he would recover in a few days with some cultivation. The vitality brought by refining the viscera is so terrifying. For someone like the king of beasts, Kaido, such an injury would probably be recovered in just one breath. However, the harvest this time was also great. Putting aside the potential reputation for now, this black dragon itself was a great treasure trove. Dragon skin and dragon scales can be made into an armor of excellent quality that is impenetrable by swords and guns. Dragon claws and dragon teeth are top-notch forging materials. With other auxiliary materials and a master blacksmith, it is possible to forge an unparalleled great sword. As for the dragon meat and dragon blood, although it's not as sacramental as the legends suggest, it still possesses unique power, boosting strength for those who consume it. For Rhodes, however, it's simply an unparalleled treat, a dragon liver or phoenix gallbladder, not something you could eat every day. Guess little Snowy will be thrilled. Amidst the awe-filled, longing, and worshipful gazes of all, Rhodes sprang from the dragon's corpse, strolling with a slow pace. The port's manager and several pirate captains were about to approach in reverence, but then a sudden twist occurred. Buzz! As Rhodes reached an open area, it seems like he triggered something, a strange light flickered through the void around him. Immediately after, a pale purple mist surged from the void, enveloping from all directions like a tidal wave. One could see that wherever the mist passed, the earth was almost instantly corroded, making a creaking noise, a frightening sight. Rhodes' expression changed slightly but soon regained composure, as he knew who had arrived. Is it that assassin, Nightblade? He muttered the name softly. The man's ruthless and decisive methods, as well as his accuracy in finding opportunities, were unparalleled. Everyone thought that Rhodes' successful dragon slaying would have resulted in heavy injuries, and he would be on verge of death. The young man's mentality would surely be inflated, inevitably becoming lax, making it the perfect opportunity to ambush. Unfortunately, acting carefree is impossible, not in this lifetime. Unless the dragon head slain today was that of Kaido. Is this some sort of devil fruit ability? Involves space, it seems like a superhuman poison devil fruit. Conceptual abilities are really troublesome. Rhodes' thoughts raced, as the poison mist spread like a plague, completely sealing off any escape routes, and the air carried a corrupting scent. What's going on? Outside, everyone exclaimed in shock. One of them, too excited from witnessing the birth of a dragon slayer, got too close and inhaled a bit of the poison mist, then almost instantly turned purple, collapsing to the ground and convulsing, saliva spilling from his mouth, and eventually melting into a puddle of pus and blood. This was just the aftermath. Everyone inhaled a cold breath and covered their mouths, quickly retreating. A dragon slayer, ha, you really did slay a dragon. But this specially made SX-type poison mist, is incredibly toxic, not even sea kings can withstand it. Rest in peace, all the spoils will be mine. In the darkness, the black-clothed Nightblade chuckled, a sickening excitement and fanaticism flashing in his eyes. Nightblade was different from other assassins. He took on bounty missions not for the reward, but for the target. For a long time, he was disinterested. He only had a fondness for slaughtering rising young superpowers like Rhodes, satisfying his twisted inner self. If not for Fire Fist Ace's Logia Flame Fruit abilities, capable of neutralizing toxins, Nightblade would have already paid him a visit. It all sounds long, but in reality, it only took a few moments. Under everyone's gaze, a black figure suddenly emerged from the purple poisonous mist, stumbling as he fled. He appeared somewhat disheveled, with a blue aura flickering on the surface. Humph, still as tenacious? Nightblade sneered, drawing a blue, poisoned dagger. Without hesitation, he charged forward, ready to strike. Rhodes, seemingly in a bad state, charged forward without anyone noticing. Swish! The dagger sliced through the air, striking like a poisonous dragon from its lair, aiming straight for Rhodes's heart. Nightblade was confident that this dagger would send the renowned young swordsman, or rather, dragon slayer, to the underworld. However, in the next moment, his expression froze. Just as they collided, Rhodes's body gracefully dodged to the side, then slammed into Nightblade with ferocity. "You're not hurt." Nightblade was shocked to see Rhodes slightly tilt his head, grin, and reveal his pristine white teeth. At the same time, his hands rested ghostly on Nightblade's chest. Thunderstorm. Boom. The thunderous power compressed to the limit burst forth like a volcanic eruption, like a small sun exploding in the sky. Nightblade had no time to react and was directly hit by the blow. The entire person flew out like a burst bag, spraying blood from mid-air, with a deep visible wound in the chest, as deep as an adult fist, with the surface tissue necrotic and finally slamming heavily on the ground in the distance. Rhodes finally stood up slowly, his complexion pale, but obviously not as badly hurt as everyone thought. The poison mist had a limited effect on Rhodes. Especially after the thunderous power is perfected, Rhodes can condense a layer of extremely dense thunder armor on his body, and the mist could not penetrate it. Even if there are leaks, he can refine his own body through the lightning current and eliminate the toxins. Cough cough. Nightblade is a well-known ace killer in the dark world, and even with this severe injury, he wasn't dead yet. He coughed blood and covered the ferocious wound on his chest with one hand, standing up tremulously, then quickly took out a green potion and poured it on the wound. The robust vitality bloomed and the wound quickly stopped bleeding and he slowly crawled back to life. Nightblade showed a hint of pain. Obviously, this potion was also very precious to him. "I've underestimated you," he muttered in a low voice, looking at Rhodes with a cold expression. As a top killer in the dark world, even without assassination and sneak attack, his own combat strength is equivalent to that of a normal headquarters captain. How could he be so badly injured by Rhodes, falling to this state? On one hand, Rhodes's trap was good. On the other hand, Rhodes's image as a sword hero was deeply rooted in people's hearts. With no sword in his hand, his vigilance drops to its lowest. Chapter 100. The Nightblade's Demise. Black Technology Elixir. Rhodes narrowed his eyes as he gazed upon the scene before him. In this world, the medical profession, like technology trees, is incredibly advanced and capable of developing various drugs and potions. On the other hand, the weaker are still stuck in medieval times, relying on bleeding and cutting to heal. But just as Nightblade took out the medicinal potion, Rhodes had already expelled the remaining toxins from his body. He clenched his fist, feeling the surge of power, and a hint of a thrilling smile appeared on his face. He slowly grasped the hilt of his sword, and the thunderous power flowed silently, his body still yet, giving off an extremely dangerous feeling like a tiger storing its strength. He recovered so quickly. Upon seeing this, Nightblade was quick to retreat. Without hesitation, he clapped his hands at his side in the empty air. And in that very moment, Rhodes struck with his sword. Thunder Sword Technique. Silent and stealthy. A flash of thunder sword energy broke through the sound barrier, bringing with it a beautiful burst of sound, a lightning bolt piercing through the sky. In a mere instant, spanning tens of meters, it struck close to Nightblade. Buzz. At that same moment, it was as if something invisible had been triggered. The front of the thunder sword energy suddenly exploded with a remarkable burst, as if dozens of bombs exploded at once, the thunderous sound lingering in the air. In the blazing firelight, the thunder sword energy swept and crushed, but inevitably slowed down due to the impact of the explosion. Whoosh! Taking advantage of the opportunity, Nightblade quickly dodged the sword energy and immediately turned to flee without hesitation. He was a killer, a master of assassination, facing off against a seasoned swordsman in a direct confrontation. Only a reckless soul would dare to attempt such a feat. Yet, even with his small movement, he was coughing up blood, his chest wound tearing open. Did he set up a retreat route in advance? Rhodes narrowed his eyes, a glint of suspicion flashing across them. Based on Koala's intelligence report and Nightblade's combat prowess, this individual was most likely a user of the Paramecia Devil Fruit ability Trap Trap. Hunters set traps to ensnare their prey. The Trap fruit is a physical manifestation of this concept, involving space manipulation and allowing its user to place traps in the void, making them all but impossible to detect. This is a deadly ability, ideal for an assassin, enabling him to lay traps and ambushes in advance, and create escape routes for himself. But, this power has its flaws. It takes a great deal of time to plan and execute the perfect trap, and the user requires specific materials such as explosives or poisonous substances. Moonstep. Rhodes pondered for a moment before suddenly leaping into the air. From mid-air, he pursued Nightblade and unleashed waves of thunderous power. Crackle. The heavenly thunder triggered one hidden trap after another, causing explosions of dazzling light and colorful poisonous mist. Rhodes smirked, and Nightblade's face turned green. He hadn't set any traps in midair. Boom! Rhodes was bathed in lightning, like a thunder god from myth, unleashing deep blue lightning bolts with astonishing energy fluctuations that tore through the air. Traps are ultimately limited in number, and Nightblade, who was gradually losing cover, was struck repeatedly, making his scalp numb, his body blackened, and his injuries worsening. Finally, he collapsed onto the ground, completely out of breath. With great difficulty, he lifted his head to gaze at Rhodes, and said with a mixture of frustration and exhaustion, "You win." Rhodes remained calm and composed, showing no signs of speaking or relinquishing his advantage. He folded his hands together, gradually building up a terrifying thunderball shimmering with silver-white light. The electric current was staggering, and the horrific arcs of electricity wreaked havoc in all directions. Even a mere glance at it made ordinary people feel as though they were being electrocuted. Whoosh! In the next moment, the thunderball pierced through the air, crossing the vast expanse and slamming into Nightblade. Boom! It was like a miniature sun exploding. An astonishing amount of light and heat was released, melting everything at its center into a glimmering, glass-like substance. At the same time, an infinite amount of electric current spread out, leaving the earth charred black. Is it over? The people in the distance dared to peek out, their faces filled with fear and anxiety. Although the battle between Rhodes and Nightblade was not as grandiose as the one against the Black Dragon, it was still heart-pounding. Especially the poisonous mist that silently claimed lives, that was the most terrifying part. Vivi and Snowy also popped their heads out from not far away. Rhodes and Nightblade's chase had almost reached the barbecue courtyard. "Sister Vivi, did Brother Rhodes win?" Snowy asked in a low voice. "I'm not sure," Vivi replied, unsure of her own answer. She was weak, and she couldn't quite comprehend the level of this battle. Snowy raised her bright eyes at the words, her little tongue licking her lips as she exclaimed, "So, does this mean we can eat dragon meat now?" At 6 Vivi was taken aback, only now realizing what had happened. Dragon Slayer. Rhodes had just slain a black dragon that had been rampaging through the harbor. The shock gave way to intense excitement. Baroque Works was a behemoth, and Crocodile made it home to the ferocious and ruthless pirate. Vivi had been worried that Rhodes would be outnumbered and outmatched. But at this moment, that fear dissipated like smoke. If he could take down a black dragon, nothing could stand in his way. Not even a sand crocodile. In the center of the arena, Rhodes landed and scanned his surroundings, with a hint of confusion and uncertainty crossing his face. "Try this." With a blue light emanating from his body, he gathered lightning energy into threads that spread out in ripples, accompanied by his color of observation haki. After carefully perceiving his surroundings for a while, Rhodes smiled slightly, and then he threw a punch from a distance. A fist made of lightning shot out and hit an empty space 3 meters in front of him. Boom! The thunderous punch exploded, and electric arcs scattered all around. In the blazing light, the silhouette of a strange substance appeared. "You're not dead after all." Rhodes chuckled and approached, taking measured steps until he was close enough to reach out with his hand, wreathed in a coating of armament haki. He extended his hand and made a gentle grasp. Armament haki was not only useful against Logia users but also against the strange abilities of certain Paramecia users. A cracking sound echoed through the air as his hand seized something solid, but it was as if there was an invisible barrier blocking his grasp, making it sound like a mosquito's whine. Rhodes snorted coldly and pulled hard. A loud buzzing sound filled the air as ripples coursed through the void, and suddenly, a figure was forcefully yanked out by Rhodes. It was Nightblade. Nightblade was in terrible condition, breathing shallowly and covered in black scorch marks that emitted the smell of cooked flesh. Clearly, even though he had used his ability to conceal himself, he had suffered numerous injuries and was now on the brink of death. After seeing the light of day again, Nightblade's eyes suddenly changed. But before he could even think of his next move, Rhodes kicked him in the chest, instantly causing his heart to burst and killing him on the spot. Nightblade stared wide-eyed, grabbing onto Rhodes' pants with a look of disbelief. He tried to speak but only coughed up blood. Rhodes took a step back and stood silently watching the downfall of this renowned assassin. Nightblade was no weakling. If he had not been so severely weakened by Rhodes' initial strike, this fight would not have ended so quickly. But strategy and planning were always a part of warfare, and Nightblade had underestimated Rhodes. With Nightblade's defeat, the major event of the Black Dragon's attack on the port finally came to a close. Reporters on the scene were exhilarated, scribbling furiously and taking several stunning photos to detail the fight's proceedings. This captivating event was sure to gain the attention of newspaper editors, and after an all-night printing, it was dispatched by newsbirds to every corner of the world. In just one night, the name Dragon Slayer spread like wildfire across the globe.